presence of a quorum, I would like to call the October 5th, 2020 meeting of the Acton Board of Selectmen to order. The town of Acton, in response to the COVID-19 coronavirus, is currently following the guidance from the Acton Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread. The town hall is closed to the public. The meeting will be broadcast live across local access cable on the ActonTV channel or streaming online at ActonTV YouTube live channel, and audio will be broadcast live on the radio on WAEEM 94.9 FM. To participate remotely from a computer, please click on the link below to join the public meeting webinar://zoom.us/zoom/j/503918785. Or from a telephone, dial 646-876-9923 and webinar ID :503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the quote raise hand feature to request to speak. So, David, are there any citizen concerns?
There's one.
Please.
Oops, she just went away. Or someone else let her speak. Susan Mitchell Hart had her hand raised. Lindsay Hurley has her hand raised.
Sure.
Well, actually, I can't make them speak at the moment. I'm not a co-host. Someone else will need to make them speak.
John or Mark?
Okay. Lindsay should be all set.
She
Lindsay,
needs to unmute herself. Unmute. There.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Loud and clear. I've never done this kind of system before. Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. This is my first Board of Selectmen meeting. Nice to be here. I have a one-page statement that I put together to share with you. I've talked with Jim about this. He knows what I'm talking about tonight. But should I just dive into this?
Please.
Okay. My name is Lindsay Hurley. I live at 10 Half Moon Hill, and I am here to bring up a concern that I have about the health hazards of wireless technology exposure in our towns, and in particular in our schools. I'm a holistic health coach, and I work with energy healing technologies, which gives me a background on how our bodies respond to energetic frequencies. Like most everything we are exposed to, there are levels of frequencies that are safe and healing, and there are other levels of frequencies that are toxic. Just like with sunshine, we get vitamin D for many important health benefits from the sun, but higher levels of exposure, as we all know, can be harmful. There are thousands of studies about the effects of wireless exposure, and it's clearly found to be dangerous to humans. The industry assures us that it's safe, just as the tobacco industry did years ago. However, if you look in your smartphone under the safety and legal settings, you will see that they state your cell phone is not supposed to be held close to your head. Why is that not more clearly shared with us all? Most of us aren't even aware of that. We must take action to protect our citizens because the industry will not. Our zoning bylaws say that companies can set up wireless towers in our towns wherever they like, as long as they follow FCC guidelines. I feel we have to have more safety regulation included in our town bylaws, and we need to protect our citizens from these dangerous exposures. I'm particularly concerned with wireless exposures to our youth. In the schools, the kids are being bombarded with microwave radiation from Wi-Fi, and again, many studies have proven that these are hazardous for young and developing children. There's a powerful documentary about this issue called Generation Zapped, and I urge you all to watch it. Numerous towns, states, and even countries around the world are starting to demand safety studies and precautions before setting up wireless installations. Burlington, Massachusetts has already adopted a small cell policy to better protect their community, and that is being emulated across the United States. Bedford, Lincoln, and Andover have already adopted it, and the city of Boston is suing the FCC over their harmful RF exposure limits. I've spoken with Senator Jamie Eldridge and Representative Dan Senna about this, and they too are concerned, and I have been urged to speak with you. I've also been in touch with Cheryl Ball at the Board of Health, and I'm sending her information for the board to look at. To be clear here, I am not anti-technology. I am just in favor of safety and avoiding dangerous exposures to the citizens of Acton. I would like to see this addressed in this town. I have been working with Cece Doucette, who is the president of Mass Safe Technology. I sent you information about that. You all got an email about that earlier this week. And she would be willing to come and do a presentation because she's certainly more versed in this topic than I am. So that's all I have to say. I don't really know where to go next with all of this. It's a tremendous concern of mine, and I would like to see us as a town move forward and check into this issue and take some action if you're all in agreement. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Is there anybody else, David?
Yes, there's Susan Mitchell-Hart,
Sure.
but I can't do her.
Do you want to be made
I've asked.
There she is.
Oh, are we ready?
Yes, Susan, sure.
Oh, thank you. Susan Mitchell-Hart, president of the Acton Conservation Trust. My residence is Polk Road, Acton. It's with deep gratitude to our donors that we ask the Select Board to accept ACT's final gift totaling $60,000 tonight. The purpose is to offset the cost of acquiring the Piper Lane lands. In a matter of 7 weeks, a record number of supporters dug deep. This allowed ACT to reach its goal, which we felt was realistic given the passion so many had exhibited for preserving the integrity of Great Hill. Thank you.
Susan, thank you very much, and the acceptance of the gift is on our consent agenda.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any further citizen concerns?
Franny Osmond is there.
Franny, please.
I don't really have to unmute. Someone could just read it. I wrote it in the chat to you, but I guess I can read it.
Please.
It's just on my father's house. It's a little noisy. Hi, I would like to say as a citizen concerned that I would appreciate as a public attendee that it would be better to share the list of participants in Zoom meetings with the participants. This could be done in various ways, technologically. It would be more fitting with being an open meeting and more similar to the town hall experience. There's no reason not to be a recognizable body of visitors and board members. Until this is done, could the chair please at least mention how many participants there are in the webinar? Thanks so much.
There are 17 participants.
Okay, but in the future, I would love to ask you to talk to IT and consider a way we could make it more similar to the open meeting feel of town hall, where you can look around and see who's there, which has a lot of value, I find. Obviously as selectmen, you can see that. So I appreciate it as selectmen, but also as a visitor to town hall, it was always very valuable to look around and see who's there. And even if it's just seeing the names, it would be useful and I think appropriate. So I just want to put in that suggestion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any further citizen concerns?
No, that's all.
Okay, so for the chair's update, I just wanted to thank John and Mark and Marianne for the wonderful town staff day we had on Friday, September 25th. 5th, it was obviously a different format than we would usually have at NARA, but I thought it was a very thoughtful and knowledgeable, and took a lot away from it. So thank you. I just wanted to update the board on a practice that Dean and I and John have instituted, and it's something that I hope we could continue with future boards. I had suggested, over the summer that myself as chair and Dean and John, Dean as vice chair, sit down a week ahead of each meeting, and as a group of 3, plan each week's agenda, go over issues that would be coming up, and look ahead to future agendas. And we've had, it's 2 of these meetings to date, and they've been really very helpful. So I really hope it's a practice that you would continue with the next board if it goes in, the normal progression for Dean and David, and then David and Jim. And so I hope that goes. In terms of agenda items, all of you are free to submit, items for the agenda. We now seem to have these meetings the Tuesday before the following week's Monday meeting. So if you could get those agenda items to us, like for the next time we'll be meeting would be next Tuesday, October 13th. For our agenda on the 19th, what we have on so far is a discussion of possible dog park sites. And we will be hearing from David Cantrell of W.R. Grace with his updates as to the W.R. Grace site, both the south side of the tracks and the north side of the tracks. Just briefly wanted to update, we had an ALG meeting on September 24th, and we had just sort of preliminarily getting down to business. Christy Anderson, the chair of the Finance Committee, put forth 3 ideas her board was coming up with. None of these were voted on or officially stamped by the committee, but they suggested 3 items: to have a tri-board group similar to what was done during the Great Recession, for the 3 boards to collectively look at ways to reduce spending between the school side and the town side. They came forth with a notion of no property tax increase for fiscal year 22. And the notion of a use of free cash, excess free cash, to pay down new capital debt. That's the debt that was incurred for the fire station, the Twin School, and Minuteman over the next couple of years. The only item that we discussed amongst the group was the tri-board task force. Dean shared his recollections of a like task force that was formed. This is what it's modeled from during the Great Recession, when he worked for the town, and his frustrations with it, that you're taking people who are evaluating town members' positions and duties without really any knowledge of municipal management operations. Amy Krishnamurthy on the school side said, our people have been just working double time, triple time, reopening school and in the face of COVID, and they really couldn't ask them to, undertake this, type of work. I echoed her sentiments in saying that, our town staff is working double time, and their efforts are so well appreciated, and there's some bit of, I found, condescension and saying kind of justify yourself as to whether you're really worth your weight. So we'll probably have this discussion again, but it didn't get any support from our two representatives or Amy speaking from the school side. So that's what I have to report. Let's hear from John, please, with the manager's update.
Thank you. I have several updates, and thanks for participating in the staff professional development day. It was really great for all 5 board members to be in attendance. The staff of about 140 people really appreciated seeing you there, and I think it was considering the circumstances, I think it was a great day, and we hope to do it again in person next year. So just some updates on the election. Early voting is going to start on next Saturday. Hold on, my flyer. So it starts October 17th, starting at 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. That Saturday and Sunday, and then voting will be available Monday the 19th through Friday the 23rd from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Then on Saturday and Sunday again, it's 9 to 1, and then the following Monday through the following Friday, the October 30th, it's 8:30 to 5 p.m. The voting location for early voting is Town Hall. Come to the back of Town Hall. We have a whole system in place to keep people separate and properly distanced, and masks are required. So that's the information there. If you have questions, check out our website or call Town Hall. There's been several people that have taken advantage of mail-in voting. We've received 9,300 applications so far. About a third of those have already had the ballots mailed out to them over this past weekend, and the clerk's office will be working to get the rest of those out as they come in. You need to return them as soon as you get them. The last day to return them is November 3rd at 8 p.m. We have the deadline to request a ballot by mail is October 20th. To request a ballot, you can go online to the Secretary of State's website or to our website and request it there. On that same state website, you can actually track the ballot after it's been processed. So that's the election and voting. Again, the actual election will be on the 3rd at the junior high for all precincts.
John,
Yes.
how many total voters are there?
I think just about 16,000.
Yeah, in the mid, in that range. Yep. So.
Okay, so more than half.
Yeah, we had
requested.
about 500 people do early voting last time for the primary. So we're anticipating that probably double that will do it this time. But there's also been a huge popularity of the mail-in ballots. So a lot of activity in the clerk's office. They're doing tremendous work trying to keep up with it all, and they're going to have a very busy next 3 weeks or so, or until November. They're going to be very busy. So that's election updates. The pump track, we had a discussion and presentation from an Eagle Scout a few weeks ago, and there were some questions that we left that meeting with, and those questions have been resolved. The questions were basically, who's going to take care of this project after the Eagle Scout moves along, and natural resources will. And I had some concerns about the concept of parking, but I've walked the site and I'm comfortable with what's being discussed. There was also a question about trash and recycling, and this will be a carry-in, carry-out park, so we're not planning on providing any of those facilities there. The Eagle Scout has been in touch with Town Hall staff, and he's continuing to do his diligence, and I'm looking forward to seeing his work out there. At the All Staff Day last week, we announced the 2019 Municipal Employee of the Year, Kristen Guichard, and the 2019 Public Safety Employee of the Year, Lieutenant Jim Byrne. This is something that we normally would do at the annual town meeting, but due to the pandemic, we cut ceremonies out of the town meeting this year, and so we saved it until the all-staff meeting to make the announcement. So I just wanted to share it with the public tonight. We have a traffic study and 25% design meeting on Wednesday of this week. It's a virtual meeting, so go to the website to learn how to log in. This is to look at the redesign of the Acton Center, right outside of Town Hall. As the chair mentioned, we're expecting a presentation from W.R. Grace on the 19th, so we'll look forward to that. West Acton and the West Acton Library were featured last week on the Chronicle of Channel 5 ABC's program. Some really nice footage of our local businesses, and our own Jennifer Friedman was featured at the West Acton Citizen Library, so that was very exciting to see. If you haven't seen it, you can look at the links on our website. We got some good news from the state. We had applied for regional funding as part of a collaborative to help out micro enterprises and public social service providers. We weren't funded in the first round, but it looks like we will get funded in the second round. So that's a serious amount of support we'll be getting to help micro enterprises and public service providers. Once we get the details from the state, I will provide them to the board and to the town. On the small business program, all the awardees have gotten their paperwork in, and we're getting the grants out shortly. One of our grantee recipients, Michael's Shoe Boutique, was actually featured in the Globe over the weekend. So hopefully you saw that article. It's a nice story. The Central Street Bike Lane pilot project. This is a project that unfortunately hasn't been completed yet. There was some shipping delays, and the signage hadn't been delivered or installed yet, which I think is causing some of the issues that we're seeing out there. We've received, as I said, positive and negative feedback on the program. But what we basically did was, as a part of a traffic calming and bicycle safety initiative, we've relined or restriped a stretch of Central Street, about 2 mile stretch. And the goal is to get cars to slow down and to make it safer for bicyclists who are trying to get up the climbing portions of the road. So there's some people that don't understand some of the engineering concepts that were implemented there. I think the signage, once installed, hopefully tomorrow, will help people better understand what's intended there. And I know our Transportation Advisory Committee is looking closely at it and will be providing us some feedback. So I just wanted to mention that because we've gotten quite a few calls on what happened out there, and it's a pilot project, and we're hoping that it works and makes it safer for bicyclists. And I think that's all I had for now. Thank you.
All right. When does early voting end?
The last day is the 30th, which is a Friday.
Okay. And the voting, is it inside town hall or is it outside?
It's inside. So what we're doing is we're only letting 2 people in at a time, and others have to wait outside. So if it's a cold or rainy day and you see people waiting, you can wait in your car and then wait till the line goes down and then come up and wait to go in. We don't want to have that many people in the building at the same time. So
it worked beautifully for the primary. We never had more than 4 or 5 people in line, and that was only occasionally.
So member minute, Jim?
I don't think I have anything from any of my committees this week. I will say I did get my mail-in ballot in Monday's mail, which I thought was amazing, and just wanted to thank the clerk's office, and I know they're working so hard in getting all those out there.
Thank you. Joan?
Yeah, the West Acton Citizens Library that John mentioned, I know it was Dean's initiative, but both the Citizens Library Board and the Memorial Library Board have discussed how they can work together. And I think that will be important for John as we go forward with the budget process.
Thank you.
Because with the revitalization of West Acton, with the new school and the ice cream shop and the restaurants and all, people could use the West Acton Library for the Minuteman books. So that's an issue and an expense that has to be considered.
Okay. David?
Yes, last Tuesday we had our first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee meeting, It went very well, considering, you know, it's a meeting that, you know, all of us getting to know each other. Next meeting is this Thursday.
Thank you. Did you people elect a co-chair?
We had nominations at the first meeting, and the vote will be at this meeting on Thursday.
And when's your next meeting?
This Thursday.
This Thursday. Thank you. Dean?
Yeah, the one issue that I've got, and I think everybody's seen the emails back and forth regarding the debacle, I would call it, in front of 5 Pearl Street, where the developer took it upon himself to basically destroy a 22-inch diameter sugar maple tree. And I suggest, you know, interested citizens might want to drive by and see a good example of what you don't do. Because not only did he essentially kill the tree, but they ended up putting a sidewalk all the way around the tree with handicap ramps. But because there's a 22-inch diameter tree in the middle of the sidewalk, obviously there's no sense of accessibility there. If you go down further to Central Street, you notice that one of the access ramps to get onto the sidewalk actually has a street sign right in the middle of the ramp. So people can't get in there either. You know, I think it's an example on the part of the developer. I mean, there's a little bit to stick on everybody here, but I think it's an example of the developer being what I would call willfully incompetent. You know, a 5th grader should know that you can't do that to a tree and expect it to survive. I'm also concerned with the fact that the design review board, when they reviewed the plans that they had didn't even show a sidewalk in that location. So I think there's a disconnect there amongst as the way information is shared with the design review board and how their reviews are actually received by town staff and by, in this situation, the zoning board of appeals. And as liaison of DRB, they've expressed their dissatisfaction. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there to sort of close up a lot of these missing links. Obviously, a lot of this occurred in a pandemic when planning staff, we had Roland on his way out into retirement, we had Kristen out on maternity leave. So, you know, everybody was stretched very thin. But the result is that there was a plan that apparently everybody thought, oh, well, we'll just put the sidewalk there. And then after the fact, if we have to, look at holding a hearing on the tree. Well, that makes the assumption that the tree has no value and that the decision would be that, well, we'll take the tree down. Well, maybe that's a good decision, maybe it's not, but I think it's a huge leap of faith on the part of zoning board of appeals and the planning staff to make those assumptions. So I think these are all things that on the town side, we certainly fallen short of. Then we get to the situation with the tree. And it's obvious to me that there has been huge amounts of root damage done if the sidewalk was properly installed, because you have to excavate all the material. Since I'm not sure that proper inspections were done, I'm not sure that the sidewalk was actually properly installed anyway. And I would think that probably the developer should be required, amongst other things, that he core a few sections of that sidewalk to prove that a proper base was laid to begin with. Then we have the situation with the tree, which, as an arborist with over 40 years of experience, I can pretty much predict that tree is going to die. We'll have to hold a hearing on it. I think everybody's agreed to that, and Selby has sent some information about that. And presumably, if the decision is made to take the tree down, then we'll apply the long-standing policy from 1991 to compensate the town for the value of the tree. The proposal I saw, though, said that if the decision is made to try to save the tree for 2 years, then the developer is only going to be liable for the cost of taking the tree down when it indeed dies. And there's nothing in that proposal to compensate the town for the value of the tree when it dies 2 years hence. So I think there's huge amounts of issues here. And I'm frankly just appalled that this kind of stuff happened. And I'm appalled that this kind of stuff happened, within a month of all of the discussion that we had about the trees on High Street. And obviously, now developers will do whatever developers will do, which will make the most financial sense for them. But I think somebody to do that, to just go ahead and pour a concrete sidewalk around an existing tree on property that they don't own, that does not speak well for the developer at all. And the fact that this whole thing got as far as it did shows that there's some problems here. And I know a lot of them are due to pandemic, and there's a lot of miscommunication. Public Works is understaffed. We haven't had a full-time town engineer for quite some time. But I think there's cracks in the vase that are occurring here. And, I applaud the town manager in trying to stay ahead of this, and he understands that we've got to start staffing up some departments so we can watch this kind of stuff. But it was just an absolute classic. I've circulated those photos around to some of my professional colleagues, and, a lot of grunts and groans looking from that. So I hope that by the time we get through with this, we'll make sure that the town is properly compensated, and that we make sure that we end up with a good sidewalk there, and that we make sure we've got some operations in place so that we can kind of monitor these things a lot more closely than was done in this situation. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. John, did you have anything to follow on to Dean with?
No, thank you. I think you raised some important points, and I think those are all items that we are in the process of addressing. The contractor did not do several things that they were supposed to do, and our building staff did identify some of those issues. And then the tree one was a big one, but the occupancy for that project is not an issue, and we'll have to sort out these issues before that can be issued. So we will continue to work on this issue and do better going forward.
Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 3, COVID-19 response updates. John?
Yes, just sort of a update on where we are from a public health standpoint. The total cases that are active in town right now is 4, which is not, we've been in the area of 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 4 ever since mid-July. So we haven't seen the spike that other places are seeing. The state has now started issuing on a weekly basis a risk status for each community. So if you look at that risk status that the state issued as of last Wednesday, we're considered lower risk, which is, if you've looked at the map online, it's a green, or the green color. And that means that we've had less than 4 cases per 100,000. If we get to a position where we have between 4 and 8 cases per 100,000, we would then be considered yellow or moderate risk. So we're in the low risk category now, and hopefully we'll stay there. We are starting to we're continuing to do reopening planning. We had talked about trying to reopen town hall, I think with early voting, though with that amount of activity, we're going to delay that until after the election's over. And we'll continue to focus on providing our window service, which we've expanded hours for our window service. We're now 10 to 2 most days, except for Fridays we're 9 to 11. So people have found that really valuable to have people to talk to out there. And we also have people stationed under the tents behind Town Hall to help residents come through. The library, Acton Memorial Library, is talking about starting with appointments only later this month. as a way to start reintroducing people to the inside of the library. We've been people are anxious to get back in there, and we want to do it carefully. We're still doing some final planning on measures that need to be in place, but we think we'll have those in place before the end of October, and look for an announcement within a week or so on the exact date and details. Other items coming up, we get a lot of, well, not a lot, we get some phone calls about Halloween. That's something that the Board of Health is actually talking about tonight, maybe right now, at their meeting. So I would expect that from those discussions, we may have some guidance to provide to the community, much like the CDC has guidance, and recently the state of Massachusetts put out guidance on Halloween and trick-or-treating. So that's another thing where we're just going to watch the public health metrics, and we'll continue to provide guidance to the community as we get closer to the end of the month. Other events coming up, we have Veterans Day, where we're going to try to do it in person, given that the governor's increased the number of people you can have in an outside gathering as of today for lower risk places like this. If those metrics stay where they are, hopefully we can do something outside with people there. Otherwise, we will go to a virtual format. That's another thing that we'll have to just decide as we get closer. Any questions on where we are from a public health standpoint with regard to the response?
Questions, anyone? So town hall, you'd hope to reopen after election day.
Yeah, I think waiting until that influx of people is passed before we start having people in again would be a better way to move forward.
Makes good sense.
I guess one other note on the financing part of it, we had a call with the state last week. 400 town officials were on a conference call with state officials talking about the rules for the Coronavirus Relief Act funds. And so we're working on submitting again for that reimbursement for all the expenses that we have for our telecommuting and all the different things, virtual conferencing that we're doing, and PPE and safety measures. We've also received requests from both the Acton Boxford Regional School District and the Minuteman Vocational Regional School District for funding that we have in Acton towards their needs. So that's something that I will plan to bring to the board later this fall when we have a more complete picture of both our needs and both of those districts' needs. Because the idea is they can't apply directly for that funding; they have to go through us as the lead town.
Thank you. Any questions on John's on the COVID report? Okay. So the next item 4 would be to discuss the annual town meeting timeline. So let me just offer this by way of background, particularly for Jim, who wasn't with us when we went through this in the spring. Town bylaw chapter A sections 1 and 2 sets it out that town meeting begins with the town election, which this year which is always on the last Tuesday in March, and this year it would be on March, in 21 it would be on March 30th. And then it ends with the dissolving of the annual town meeting, which begins on the first Monday following the annual town election, which in 2021 would be on April 5th. At our ALG meeting on September 24, both John and John Peterson of the school side suggested, could we put off annual town meeting until late May or June to allow more time for the revenue numbers to firm up. It was also, my thought that I just couldn't see, given the early April weather, that we could possibly hold a town meeting on April 5th. And it just, at this point, would be, inappropriate to, although we legally could, hold an all indoor town meeting. So we we used this statutory provision earlier. It's Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 39, Section 9, which, regardless of charter or bylaw provisions to the contrary, a select board may delay annual town meeting by a simple majority vote, so long as the business of annual town meeting is completed by June 30 of the year. That'd be June 30, 21. So I spoke with Nina about steps involved, and we could do it similar to the way we did it in 2020, where we could take a first vote to delay town meeting. Just we are delaying town meeting to a date uncertain, so long as it's done by June 30 of 21, and then we could take some weeks later a subsequent vote to set the exact date of the meeting. The first step, voting to delay town meeting, we could deal with as early as this evening. Now, note that in Town Charter Article 6, Section 2, and this really gets to John's point, that he is required to present the manager's budget recommendations to both the Selectmen and the Finance Committee at least 100 days prior to town meeting. So normally for an end of March town meeting, his budget would have to be presented by the middle of December. If we go to a town meeting, say on Monday, June 21, 2021, it can be done in early March. So that would give John 2.5 additional months to watch numbers and see how they develop and make choices and work his budget out. Now, with respect to the annual town election, if the select board does not have any statutory authority to move the date, that's within the hands of the governor if there's an emergency, or by act of the state legislature, the way it was done this past spring. I asked Nina whether, because we're one of the small number of communities in the state that links the town election to the annual town meeting, she said we don't necessarily have to link the two events, and the March 30 town election can stand, and we can, under our Section 9 powers, move the annual town meeting to June. Now, the key with the town election is that a special 2020 enactment by the legislature authorized voting by mail for municipal elections through December 31, 2020 only. And for our town, our postponed town election, which was held on June 2, we had 2,800 people voting. 1,900 voted by early ballot. So I've asked her if she would push ahead through her legislative contacts to see what we can, what can be done as soon as possible to extend the 2020 law for another year. She did point out to me, just as an aside, that under another state statute, that voting by mail in state elections is allowed, so long as you apply for the early ballot. Ballots are just not mailed routinely. So let's then discuss first whether we would like to, delay the town meeting, and if we would we like to take that action as soon as this evening and break it into the two steps that I suggested. So Dean?
Yeah, I think it makes eminent sense to delay town meeting. Even before the pandemic hit and there was so much uncertainties, it's a real horse race to get the town manager to have the budget ready in early December. And now with such uncertainties about revenue, and we just need to give the manager some tools to work with. So I would personally be in favor of delaying town meeting, until the date to be determined, but I'm thinking we're probably looking at probably late May, or perhaps early June. I think that just it's one of the things we just have to do, and they seem to have the technique down now for having a hybrid type town meeting. So I'm all in favor of the delay.
Yeah, just to offer a comment on the date, Dean. I emailed Peter Light and asked him, do you have a date when the high school year will end? The way he pointed out at ALG that students are in the school on Monday and Tuesday and Thursday and Friday, with the only open day being Wednesday. And, we've really got to be careful on this. So if we use a Wednesday, and it rains, it may be difficult to do things Thursday or Friday. And we'll have to see as an option, just to keep in mind, when does the school year end? And, I was thinking probably more for a town meeting on, Monday, June 21st or Monday, June 28th. But if we can do it, safely earlier, that's, certainly fine. Other comments, David? You're
Yeah, sorry. I'm fine with delaying it starting tonight or whenever we want to do that. I would favor a little bit earlier town meeting in June. I'd rather see it in the end of May. I think Foxborough's is currently scheduled for mid-May. Maybe they'll change that, but I think that's what their schedule is right now. I think we could probably figure out a 1 week delaying tactic if it rained or something. But anyway, I think when you get down to the so close to the end of the fiscal year, there are other worries that are, when we're the 21st is only 9 days away for the end of the fiscal year. So if there's a problem in passing the budget or passing the school budget, I think that's to me a little bit nerve-wracking. So I'd rather see us aim for the end of May, but I'm fine with delaying it tonight and to a date not set.
Yeah, just keep this in mind. And John, if you would correct me, because we had this discussion back in June when we thought we might encounter rain on the 29th and 30th, that we rent the stuff for, I think it's several days.
Well, no, it's quite an operation that has to show up that day, and some of the costs would have to be sunk if we cancel, unless we cancel with enough notice to them, and which would be probably a day's notice. But yeah, some of the costs, some of the rentals, I think having a rain date is something we can work out. We just have to call it early enough to be able to make it not too expensive.
Okay, so with respect to delaying town meeting, if there are no further questions or comments, Jim?
Yeah, one thing I didn't understand, you've talked about how our charter has this odd feature that the town meeting technically begins right with the election. And I didn't know if we're trying to have this, the 100-day gap go back to something more reasonable like March. And does this odd feature of our charter frustrate that goal?
I mean, the 100 days for the budget?
Yeah, I mean, so the fact that the town meetings technically starts in some way on the with the election on the at the end of March?
Yeah, it would be 5 days apart, 6 days apart. The like for 21, the town election would be Tuesday, March 30th,
Right.
and the town meeting would start on Monday, April 5th.
Right. But if we, I still don't get, if we reschedule the town meeting to late in June, for example, do we still get to count backwards?
Yes, I believe, yes, it would count that way.
From the legal date of the start of town meeting with the election.
It's all in one, but in terms of the 100-day count,
Mm-hmm.
it would start from the actual meeting date.
Great.
So it would be, say April 5th, or if it's June 21 or May 31.
Great, thank you.
Count backwards from there.
I'm very comfortable with delaying the meeting to a date uncertain tonight. And I would toss in the suggestion that maybe it's time to try a Saturday meeting. We're going to try to get all this business done in one day. Maybe that's a day to do it.
Yeah, that's a good thought. David?
Yeah, I move that we delay the April 2021 town meeting to a date to be determined.
If I could offer this friendly amendment to a date to be determined later, but before June 30, 2021.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Yes.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, then, David, if you'd call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I say aye, so it's unanimous.
Okay, so turning then to the annual, town election. So it's a question of whether we want to, keep to the March 30 date, or request the legislature to, at a subsequent date, I guess, move it to another, or act now to make the request now to move the date to a later date. Or do we want to leave it as it is? And, the key item to work would be get the extension of the 2020 law that would provide for early voting in the municipal election. So what would be the group sense, David?
I favor that. I would favor not changing the date of the election, but asking for permission to have early voting and mail-in ballots.
Okay. Further comments on that idea? All right, so I don't think we need a vote on this, but let me ask Nina again that the consensus of the board was to keep the March 30 town election, and if she would proceed through her legislative contacts to have the 2020 law extended for another year through the end of 2021 to permit the early voting. Is that good? Okay. Okay, so that would cover that item. Then we were on to number 5. The board to vote on acquisition of 4 Piper Lane, 4R Piper Lane, 6 Piper Lane, and a portion of 90 School Street purchase and sale agreement. John.
So for this is basically the final paperwork we need for the closing. The closing for this acquisition is scheduled for, I believe, the 23rd of this month. So what I can do is share on my screen the latest copy of the deed. Is that showing up for people?
Mm-hmm.
I did send this to the board, I think maybe on Friday. It hasn't changed since then, but as you can see, there are still some things that need to be added to it. But the purpose of the action that we're seeking tonight is for the board to vote on the deed and take a series of votes that town council has laid out for you in a separate sheet, which I can go through next. But before I do, I want to see if there are any questions on the deed. $1.15 is million is the acquisition purchase price. It lists the parcels and the lots based on the deed research. There are a couple things that need to be filled in, but I expect that they will be soon. And that's that. Are there any questions on that?
Okay, so John, there are two votes that we have to take under the certificate of vote of the Acton Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, and I can actually share that.
Sure, please.
Thing that we're asking you to vote. Let's see here, certificate. So this is a document that we'd ask you to vote on, and there are two motions, and then we'd have the town clerk certify that you did that, and that'll be recorded, or that'll be necessary for the closing. So I can read this, or you can read this, or I don't know how you want to handle this part of it.
Move it, or can you move it up a little bit to the votes? Yeah. I move that we approve the deed to the property substantially in the form presented at the October 5th, 2020, with final changes to be made by the town manager in consultation with town council.
Okay, is there any discussion on the first vote? Okay, if there's no discussion, then David, would you please call the roll?
We need a second, John.
We need a second, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Second. Jim says.
Second. Okay, David?
Yeah, okay. Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say aye.
Right.
Okay. Then I move to authorize the town manager to take all actions on behalf of the town that are reasonably necessary in the judgment of the town manager to complete the purchase of the property in accordance with the purchase and sale agreement dated as of August 7th, 2020 by and between Piper Lane LLC as seller and the town and buyer, and the applicable town meeting vote, including without limitation, delivering closing funds and signing deed acceptances, closing forms, closing documents, and settlement statements.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, then David, if you please call the roll.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say aye. So that's unanimous.
Okay, well done. So our next item is the board to discuss the house located on 6 Piper Lane. That's the Magoon House. And to consider declaring it a surplus. Dean or John? John?
Let me just start. I know that Dean has some input on it, but since the town technically doesn't own the property yet, it may be too early to declare it as surplus. But I think tonight, the purpose of tonight is to have that conversation, and then we can bring a form of vote to a future meeting for the board to consider if that's what this discussion produces.
Okay, Dean?
Yeah, so a couple of items regarding the house. That we are about to acquire. When the Community Preservation Committee voted the funds to purchase the land, the entire purchase was for open space preservation. There was discussion, but there was not any vote on preserving the house. In point of fact, on CPC, the housing advocates actually were not enthused with attempting to keep the house because it would divert funds that were more appropriately spent on projects like the Main Street Housing Authority project. So I presented that to town meeting. I think that it was very clear in my presentation that the intent was that the house would be either removed from the site or demolished. So I think in keeping good faith with town meeting, I think we have no options. Now, a couple of other items that people might think about. Well, gee, is it a historic house? And would it be subject to the demolition delay bylaw? In point of fact, since the house is not within the historic district, but it is obviously within the town of Acton, normally it would have to be considered by the Historical Commission for a demolition delay. But for the fact that the demolition delay bylaw specifically excludes properties owned by the town of Acton. So that bylaw does not apply to town-owned properties. The issue that we had with attempting to dispose of the Asa Perlin house behind Town Hall, what stopped us there was not the demolition delay, but the fact that that building is within the historic district, so a different set of laws. Additionally, the Historical Commission went into the house some years ago and investigated it, and they had made the determination that there was really no historic value to the house, and that their intent was that even if it was still in private hands, they would not evoke any delay in the demolition of the building. So I think what we've got is a house there which frankly would impede access for people to be able to get onto the site. We have way too many old houses that are owned by the town that are allowed to deteriorate. They quickly become a money pit no matter how good they are when you start out with them. So I think it's important that we get rid of it. I would suggest that, the town manager, when it's declared surplus, put out an RFP and see if there's any interest in someone taking the house. This is similar to a process that is being undertaken now at the Discovery Museum. If there's some way that somebody can come in there and get some value out of it, and if the town can get compensated in some fashion, that would be great. I'm not expecting that to happen, but if it does, that would be wonderful. And if not, I think it's demolition time.
Thank you, Dean. Further comments or questions? David?
Yeah, we were under a very tight timeline in this situation. I would have loved to have had a little bit more time to have this be considered for a habitat project or something like that, a habitat rehab. But, I think there, you said, Dean, there's probably no way considering, to be in good faith with town meeting and everything. So it's just unfortunate.
Jim?
A couple thoughts. One is that I wonder if there's an intermediate, if the actually, never mind. I think I think Dean and John spoke to this, that we really don't need to have a final discussion or decision on this until after we actually own the property. And given the length of the agenda and the time, I'm happy to say nothing at this point.
Any further discussion on 6 Piper Lane? Okay, so we'll resume this. We'll resume the conversation after the closing when we own the property. Thank you. So the next item is number 7, to discuss appointments to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. David, you have 2 rounds of appointments and 1 amendment.
Yes. So what I'm the first 2 parts of this are pretty straightforward. If you remember, for the initial makeup of the commission, the commission allows 9 to 11 full members and 2 associate members, and we originally appointed 9 full members and 2 associates. So the first 2 parts of this fill out the commission, taking the 2 associates, Diane Randolph and Leela Ramachandran, promoting them up to full members, and appointing 2 new members as associates, Julie Onos and Simon Lee. And the third part of this, when we set up the original members, Dean suggested actually that if we thought we needed more members, we could do that. And I'm not anxious to have more full members because it just makes it a little bit harder to get a quorum, but I think 2 more associates would be appropriate if the board wanted to consider doing that. So I don't know if we want to take these, John, you want me to do these in 3 separate motions or 1 big motion? Or
Yeah, why don't we do the appointments as one and then amend the charge.
Okay, I would move that we promote Diane Randolph and Leela Ramachandran to full members of the DEIC, and appoint Julie Onos and Simon Lee as associate members of the DEIC.
Second.
And is there any further discussion? Okay, David, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I say aye. Okay, and the last part, I don't know if you want to discuss first. You want me to make a motion? Either way, it's just allows 2 more associate members.
Yeah, I guess the motion would be to amend the charge to allow up to 4 associate members.
Right. The charge in one part of it says, quote, up to 2 associate members. This would propose amending that to say, quote, up to 4 associate members.
That would be fine. Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, then David, please call the roll.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I say aye. So that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, so Jim, you're going to be up for the next 3. This is item A, to discuss Selectmen goal number 8 regarding housing discrimination study. Jim?
Yeah, can we move Liz Rust from being a participant to being a panelist?
She is.
I think I am.
Oh,
She
great.
is right.
Great, absolutely. Wonderful. Hi, Liz.
Aye.
So yeah, I'm gonna talk about a little bit, and then Liz is gonna take over, and then I have a little closing to clarify what the questions are. So to start, this was our short-term goal number 8 from our July goal setting session. We said plan and prepare for a study to test housing discrimination and identify impediments to fair housing choice. So I want to give you a progress report on this goal, including some information about options we have, and get feedback from the board on how we might proceed. Liz Rust, who's with our Regional Housing Services Office, is here to help explain some of this. This summer, a study came out entitled Race and Voucher Discrimination in the Metro Boston Rental Housing Market. I've put a link to that study in the packet and an article about it from the Globe. I just want to read the first couple of paragraphs from the article, because this is what really pulled me to want to add this as a goal. An undercover investigation released Wednesday found that Black people posing as prospective tenants in Greater Boston were shown fewer apartments than whites and offered fewer incentives to rent, and that real estate agents cut off contact when the renters gave Black-sounding names like Lakeisha, Tyrone, or Kareem. The white testers in the study, posing as would-be renters, on the other hand, easily secured tours of properties, were wooed with discounts, and got preferred treatment, such as the opportunity to view additional units when looking at apartments. In subtle and overt ways, Black renters experienced discrimination by real estate brokers and landlords in 71% of the cases tested in the study. So there have been questions asked when we've talked about this before about whether there's discrimination based on race in housing in Acton, and the answer is we don't know. But there's no magic rainbow that prevents the impact of unconscious or conscious bias from escaping beyond Route 128. As you probably know, in the 30s and 40s, federal policies kept towns in and around Acton largely white by, for example, denying VA loans and FHA loans to Black families. This was explored recently in a great article in the Spectrum, a high school paper, which I've also linked to in the packet. And this information was also explored in great detail in The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. So this goal number 8 was designed to ascertain how much racial discrimination in housing is a problem in Acton. And it's an open question because the discrimination can be subtle. The study showed widely disparate callback rates and other signs. I mean, if you're a Black family looking for a place to rent and you don't get a call back, or we're only shown some houses and not others, how would you know that was the result of discrimination? Testing has been the standard of uncovering these sorts of problems since the 1960s and the modern fair housing era. Both the housing production plan goal that relates to this and the Selectmen goal mention impediments to fair housing, which is a much bigger topic than just testing, and includes more kinds of discrimination than racial discrimination. So I want to give Liz a chance to explain a bit about the larger world of fair housing and how communities have gotten together to address it, and some possible options for Acton.
Thank
Liz,
you. Yeah.
All yours.
Yep.
Liz.
Hi. So I have some slides that I can go through. Should I do? Can I do share screen? Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So is that? Am I sharing my screen?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very good. So let me just get going here. Yeah. So I'm just going to start with some background material. Here's the RHO service model. I think that you're all familiar with this. 9 towns. And what I wanted to mention here is over on this side, what the towns get when we talk about here, program development and administration. What one of the things we do for some of these other towns is to administer their participation in the home consortium. And the home consortium, is a regional group of 13 contiguous communities, of which 5 of them are in the RHSO service area. It's a regional collaboration that's a vehicle to flow federal home funds through formula. And one of the responsibilities for participating members is to affirmatively further fair housing. And that's why we even talk about this tonight. And you can see, here you are at Acton, so that you were really next to Concord here, and here's that whole consortium. The consortium, this is hard to read, but just a little background on what it is it has allocated program funds and administrative funds. And here, if you expanded this, you'd see how much money people are getting. Communities have exclusive access to their funds, and uncommitted funds are annually rolled into a competitive pool for them to use. Yep. Oops. All right. HUD imposes this obligation to affirmatively further fair housing by requiring the communities that receive federal funds to provide an analysis of fair housing every 5 years. So every 5 years, this group of 13 communities get together and work on a fair housing plan. DHCD, as a recipient of fair housing, also has they call this the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. That's the title for the fair housing plan. And here's some links to the consortium document as well as DHCD's document. The consortium has current efforts underway with a 2020 later this year submission plan to HUD, assisted by consultants that the consortium hired. So there's some fair housing analysis work being done for that consortium area. When we talk about that, and this analysis of impediments plan, this is what the housing production plan goal number 8 is. It has a number of components. What is fair housing? What's the demographic analysis, housing quality, affordability and choice. What are the impediments and recommendations and action steps? Something to think about is that fair housing is distinct from affordable housing because it's looking at all housing, not only units that are restricted in any way. So there's some overlap, but they are very different. And this few slides, these are materials that we did training given by Suffolk University that has a strong fair housing arm in 2019, and it's just a brief summary that gives you some background in fair housing. This goes too fast. So this is their title page. Sorry. This was their agenda for the training. Go too fast here. So fair housing is really talking about protected classes. And in Massachusetts, you have the federal classes that we pay attention to. Massachusetts that are added through Mass General Law, Chapter 151B, and additional. So that these are all the groups of people who are protected under fair housing. So when you talk about just race, there's lots of other things that you can look at when you're thinking about fair housing. Types of discrimination, you can read those. I'm not going to go through this in more detail. What we talk about is a discriminatory effect. So even though that you might not be intentionally creating a fair housing situation, the effect of your actions might be that it is. Who must follow? This is, pretty much everyone who's a party in real estate. The types of transactions that are covered. Prohibited conduct. And then I just picked up one example to show just how nuanced this can be. So here's just an ad. And I think that it's really, I don't know if we can see this right here. It says, this is a great property for students and professionals. So so it's best to not describe the type of people who might be interested. It's not an active adult community, some of that. So it gets at some of those things. Here's tenant screening, and yeah. So that's just some background in the complexity and what fair housing is all about. Very quick, 1 minute, 2 minutes, but just to give you a flavor for some of the depth of the work there. So what's going on in the consortium? So the consortium that has that plan that I mentioned, so it's going to HUD by the end of the year. We, on behalf of the 5 members as part of the consortium, would facilitate the action items for the member communities, and testing is one of the recommendations in the report. So there's probably going to be 20 items in the report for recommendation. It's still in draft now, so I'm not able to really share what the action plans there, but testing is pretty strong, and there's work going on now to find a testing partner who would, there's a number of organizations, but not too many, let's say a handful, who are trained and able to do testing. And so working with them to see what would the scope and cost be for the consortium. And then just in summary, fair housing, it's a complex area. I hope in my 5-minute spiel here that you could see that because of the number of protected classes. Education and awareness are key cornerstones. Wait, I think I missed a slide, right? I'm sorry. Yeah. This is the key slide for you. So I was like, already went to summary, right? And I think Jim will really talk to these points, is to establish a community focus area or committee. So that'd be one thing of where in Acton might fair housing fall, whether it's an existing committee or one of your newer committees or a yet new one. And then once that's formed, to educate, provide a baseline of understanding, get a presentation. We can help you with that from subject matter experts to come in and do one of these larger presentations. There's some fair housing quizzes that help you understand, where your basis of understanding is and to develop some expertise, and then looking at options for next steps. There is, you could think about joining the consortium overall, as a major strategic effort. You could embark on the Acton specific analysis of impediments per the housing production plan, or activate a testing program. Any of those things you could do to further your fair housing goals. And then there we go, the summary, right? So complex area, education and awareness are key, and you're to be commended for your proactive interest.
Thanks, Liz.
Okay.
Let me just finish off, just to sort of clarify the questions that I have for the board. Let's see. So we have a couple of opportunities here. Specifically, we could, without fully joining the consortium, we could cooperate with the consortium on the planning and funding for the testing. And presumably it would be easier financially to share the cost of this among a number of towns. One might imagine, based on what's happened in other consortiums, that there would be a rolling testing, where there would be, 1 year they test some towns, another year they test some other towns, and then over the course of a period of time, we'd have comparable data from a lot of towns about, what the housing discrimination is happening. Also, the consultants from the consortium can help us understand what we do when we find these issues, if we do. What's the educational component? What's the enforcement component? Whereas, how do we go about addressing these things? Another step, as Liz mentioned, would be looking at the possibility of actually joining the consortium, which is obviously a much larger and complex idea. But even with the notion of joining with the consortium on doing the testing, we understand that that's there's financial implications of that, there's staffing implications of that. So I'm certainly not expecting any kind of decision tonight. I'm just hoping that we can get feedback to the town manager and town staff so that they can help us understand what kind of next steps are possible. So to be more focused on what I'm looking for, doesn't make sense to get some people together to actually study this in more detail. And if so, would this work better as an official advisory committee, or a working group assisting staff, or as a pure staff effort? And it seems like if we're going to include volunteers, we might want to include people from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission, and the housing groups, the ACHC, the AHA, and perhaps the Citizens Group Housing for All. Who else should be included? And as an alternative, should one of these existing groups be asked to add this to their portfolio? So those are the questions, and people might have general questions about fair housing or about the consortium.
I wanted to mention something in terms of Acton participating just in the testing portion of the consortium's action plan. That would be probably some number of months to determine if that would be possible or how that would occur without joining the consortium. I mean, the consortium is pretty bounded through its structure. So I don't really know. We'd have to work through how that would really look. So I don't know. You couldn't really vote on that tonight because I don't think that's presented as an option, but more of a direction to follow.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
Okay, from the board, questions, comments? David.
So I'm in favor of doing this. It's something that I have. I've heard these stories directly in Boston over the last few years, well before the Globe article, and the housing discrimination practices happen, all around Boston. I'm very much in favor of studying this, and I'm just in favor of doing it in the kind of whatever the most practical method is. If it's a good thing and we get benefits from it, I would be in favor of joining the consortium. I don't know what the costs are with doing that and that kind of thing. If that's impractical in some way, maybe it's something that we do on our own. And I also would, like an assessment of how much work we think this is as far, for a committee, whether we would, this could be folded into the ACHC's role. The ACHC certainly abuts this work, and so I don't know whether that's possible or makes sense. So anyway, I'm in favor, but there's a lot of logistics to work out.
Dean.
Yeah, a couple of points. One is that I'm wondering if this is in effect anticipating the work of the DEIC, and should we wait till DEIC has really got its feet under it, and see if they think that this is an important enough issue to work on. So I think it's not good practice for the Board of Selectmen to establish a committee and then start undercutting it and saying, well, okay, these are things that we're going to take on our own. So I think at the very least, we need to have DEIC weigh in on it, analyze it. They might have some suggestions. They might have some stories that they can tell. So I think that's important. Secondly, the funding piece of it, RHSO right now gets its funding under affordable housing through the Community Preservation Committee. And I'm presuming that if we're looking at joining another consortium, I don't know how much that's going to be. We don't have a lot of extra money floating around in the couch cushions. So I'm presuming that it's probably going to be going to CPC to look for money to sort of expand the pool of resources in addition to what we normally issue to RHSO. So if you make that determination, those sort of applications are due by early November. So I think first off, we need to get some idea as to how much any of these things will cost. I'm frankly thinking that this is coming at a fairly late in the process, although you wouldn't think of the 1st of October as being late in the process, but I think there's a lot of decisions need to be made. And obviously money that is it's going to go to this consortium, if it goes under the guise of affordable housing, is money that's going to be taken away from the more traditional places where money is allocated under CPC, and most importantly, the big housing projects like the Main Street project. So I think I think this is something that, maybe if DEIC thinks this is important, it might be something that we're looking at a year down the road.
Jim.
Just wanted to provide some thoughts on some of that. As Liz pointed out, affordable housing is different than fair housing. So it's possible, it seems quite likely to me, in fact, that CPA funding would not be an appropriate source for specifically the wider world of fair housing. So I think we'd be looking at a different funding source. The other thing to understand is that joining the consortium is not a cost. It's certainly staff time to review the agreement. It's actually a source of funds. By joining the consortium, we become eligible for the federal funds from HUD. So it's there's a portion, not all, but there's a portion of the work of the consortium that is entirely funded by HUD money. So it's a way of bringing new money in. That might be, as we research this, that might be a choice point between, joining the consortium or just joining the testing part. If there was some way of just joining the testing part, we would presumably need to participate in the extra cost of that. So, as staff looks into this more deeply, that's something to consider. That could be joining the consortium comes with federal funds. That's all.
Liz?
Yeah, so I just wanted to echo what Jim said. So when we administer the consortium on behalf of the member communities or a system in that, it spreads out that fixed cost for the administrative activities, of which there are some for sure. It does allow access to the funds, and for the Housing Authority Main Street project would be a perfect, you know, target for home funds. Testing will always cost more than any staff time, and so that would be your largest sort of expense dollars. And by doing it through with other communities, you would defray some of that. You know, if that's a practical approach to take, but versus going at it yourself.
Let me just follow on to Dean's comment and ask this to David. During the anticipated work of the DEIC, you know, wouldn't evidence or incidents of housing discrimination, if there are any, come up through your commission's work?
Yes, I suspect that we will hear some things, but that's not quantitative statistics, right? The testing produces statistics, which is very important, and the DEIC would certainly be interested in understanding those statistics, right? So if those statistics exist, we would be very much interested in seeing them. And if the board wants the commission to try to advise and guide on this program, I'm sure that we can participate in that as well, and very happily participate in that. So that's also good. So I mean, it's up to the board whether you know who the board wants to drive this and assist in it. You know, it seems to me that there are a couple of choices. You know, the ACHC, which I mentioned before, the DEIC, or a new group potentially. But you know, I think a new group is a little you know, just kind of adds to the confusion a little bit. You know, I would rather, you know, if there was a new group, I would like to see it composed of members of the ACHC and the DEIC. And I would like to see us join the consortium. You know, I think as somebody said earlier, that you know we have to have the staff to be involved in that, and so. But I think that's important.
Joan, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Jim, for bringing this topic before us. I think it's too preliminary tonight to make a final decision on these issues. So.
Great.
Jim.
To summarize, then, it might be there might be some helpful conversations or investigation between you know, town staff and Liz on sort of just understanding more about the you know, the implications that from a staffing point of view and financial point of view, and then maybe we can come back and update the board when there's more information developed. The other part that I'm hearing is that I would be happy to get information to the DEIC about fair housing and the consortium as something that they can, you know, absorb and deal with as they wish, and you know, and get their thoughts.
That would be valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine during the course of the commission's work, if there are incidents or evidences of housing discrimination in town, they will hear about it.
Well, you know, as Liz mentioned in her report, you know, even the incidents that I've heard about in Boston, it's people have an impression that they were a victim of discrimination. They really can't know because they don't know what was done for people that were, you know, white or in another, you know, non-discriminated group, right? So they don't. A single individual is not able to do the testing. I mean, so you know, the people would come to the NAACP Boston branch and say and believe that they were a victim of discrimination and seeking help, but they wouldn't know right, it's very difficult to know for an individual.
But
I
if,
can just add also that people, if they feel like they're being discriminated against, will go right to the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination.
Yes.
And that they won't report it in town, but they'll go to a group that has some authority to enforce.
I think what often happens though is they just swallow and move on.
Mhm.
Thanks.
okay, so Jim, how would you wish to leave it, and what would be your suggestion for going forward?
So it seems like there's two suggestions for going forward. One is getting some information. I can work with David on how to bring this information to the DEIC, whether they'd like a presentation or a document or whatever. We could ask John to have planning staff and Liz communicate more about, to develop some of the details of what the options might be for either being involved in testing or joining the consortium.
Okay. John, are you comfortable with that? Jim's second point.
With working with Liz on identifying potential costs and options?
Well,
sure, absolutely.
so that would be both testing and Jim.
And joining the possibility of joining the consortium and the possibility of working with the consortium on testing.
Okay, so that's okay. So John and staff look at testing and joining the consortium, and Jim and David providing information to the EIC.
Yeah, and I'll come back with more information when those two processes have had a chance to run through.
Okay, so we'll stand by that.
Are you by giving information to the DEIC? Are you looking to them to incorporate fair housing in their work, or is that still open?
I think it's too early to tell.
Yeah, I mean, their charge is, in terms of minority groups in town, to identify problems that exist and to pose, solutions. That would be in their ultimate report.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So John, there's one person with her hand up.
Sure, please.
Janet, please go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Janet Adachi, Simon Hapgood Lane, and I'm also the chairman of the ACHC. But the ACHC is probably going to be talking about this topic at some point in the near future. So I don't want to opine about how the committee might respond, but I was involved along with Bob Van Meter, who's the vice chairman, and Jim Snyder-Grant, in the Home Consortium's presentation, I think it was last week, of their draft executive summary regarding the findings of obstacles to fair housing in the consortium towns. And so there was a slide presentation. I'd be glad to forward that to, well, Jim has it, so you could circulate it to your colleagues, and as well, including David. But I circulated that to the ACHC, and some of the members told me that they really wanted to talk about it. But as Liz has explained, and Jim has also indicated, the whole process of doing testing really requires a context, which is complicated. And however Acton ends up doing it, whether it's as sort of part of the consortium, which is another decision, or something else, it really requires that you have professionals who actually know how to structure these things. I hope that nobody's contemplating that a bunch of well-intentioned residents are going to get together and figure this out, because I think that's a recipe for problems. It's a sensitive issue, and what we don't want to do is get people riled about this issue. We want everybody to recognize if there is an issue, that there's an issue, and figure out how to resolve it. But in the meantime, I do think we have this new committee, the DEIC, which I will start using the acronym for because it's a lot easier. But I think let them start working on and doing their thing. And I wouldn't want to sort of have the housing issue become a distraction. I think they should be able to, and I hope David will let them talk freely about the issues that really are troubling them, whether it's housing or something else. But I would mention that fair housing concepts are, working on fair housing is incorporated or encompassed in the new 2020 housing production plan. So even though affordable housing is different from fair housing, there is some compatibility between what the ACHC's principal charge is and fair housing. So, but there was a little group of us who talked informally, Jim, Liz, and then town staff, about this whole idea of fair housing. And I think it might be a good idea to have a group, I don't want to say a committee, but a working group that kind of works with whoever's going to be doing all of the professional stuff, the high level stuff, to train people perhaps in town as testers. We don't know yet, but to have a group of representatives from committees, probably DEIC, ACHC, and then obviously some planning staff and who knows who else, but to work together and sort of oversee the whole effort. But those are my ideas. As I said, ACHC hasn't talked about this, but they're aware that this issue may be coming up on a future agenda. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Is there anybody else?
No, John.
No public comment. Thank you. Jim, Liz, thank you very much. The next topic is a statement from the MAPC regarding systemic racism. Jim, please.
Thanks, John. So this agenda item harkens back to, again, our goal-setting session in July. And as you may recall, as we looked over this large list of potential goals we had all come up with, we moved some into a special category of items that were seemingly either simple or already in process that we could just deal with without making them formal goals. The two that I remember are creating an updated org chart and coming up with some statement of our stand against racism in the face of the killing of George Floyd. So tonight, I wanted us to have a chance to talk about how and whether we should craft such a statement. And so the statement you have in the packet, there's two. There's an extensive statement signed by 19 town managers and mayors in the metro area. It starts with general principles, including an anti-violence approach to policing. Then it has a section on state oversight policy, which doesn't include any statement about limiting qualified immunity, which was a topic that came up at a previous board meeting, and a section on local policy that seemed to include some parts that our police department has already done, such as banning chokeholds, and some topics that are part of our other goals, such as examining the role of the police in delivering human services, and some goals that haven't been part of board discussions yet, such as having some form of civilian review board. So I'd asked John Mangiarotti if he was planning to sign it, since this was a statement from town managers, and he said that a statement on these topics would be better if it came from the board. The next statement that I wanted to present as a possible model to learn from is this much shorter and focused statement from the Boxborough Board of Selectmen entitled Acknowledging Racial Disparity. And it's much shorter. It makes no specific policy recommendations. It does explain that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter, and ends with a simple affirmation that they'll place anti-racism at the top of their priorities. There's two more pieces of this puzzle that I wanted to make sure were in our awareness before we got feedback from each other about this. The first is that our creating and chartering of a diversity, equity, and inclusion commission that includes a particular focus on Black lives is a statement in itself of our priorities. And if we proceed to create a written statement from the board, I think it would certainly make sense to do this in cooperation with the members of that commission. The second is that our town manager has been working on this topic by creating a staff-led diversity work group that may also have useful input into racially related issues facing the municipality and how to address them. So with that as background, I just wanted to leave room for board members to say anything about whether and how we should craft a statement about racism and our stand against it. And if people have any particular thoughts about whether the Boxborough or the MAPC models seem like useful starting points.
Do you have a copy of the Boxborough statement that you could put up on the screen?
I can do that.
Absolutely.
You want me to do that?
You can do that.
Sure.
That'd be great if you've got it right there. It was at the bottom of the packet, way after all that MAPC material.
Can you see that now?
Got it.
Fits on a page.
Yeah, it sits on a page, and kudos to them. They did a great job.
Has Boxborough formed their own equivalent to a DEIC?
I didn't believe so.
Do you know any other communities that have formed a DEIC equivalent?
At the time we started, I believe that there was only one that I could find, but I've been told since that there are other communities, including Maynard. I was told. I don't know that for an absolute fact, but I was told that Maynard has formed an equivalent committee. So we were reasonably quick in forming our commission. Each community's kind of done their own thing. Boxborough formed this statement.
David.
So I think it is important that we do something here. I actually, so there are two very different styles between the MAPC statement and the Boxborough statement. The MAPC statement is very specific in lists of things that are good to do, specific actions for police departments, specific actions for communities, things like that. Very good. The statement from Boxborough is in some ways, in my mind, a more powerful statement, kind of a statement from the heart. And it doesn't really have a specific, bullet list of items that need to be done. I find it actually a little bit more powerful. It's more powerful, especially because since it's pretty concise. I think we could do either of those, or we could ask the DEIC to craft something for the board's consideration. Any of those three. It depends on what the board wants to do in terms of style, right?
Okay. Other members? Dean or Joan?
Well, I recommend that we turn this over to David's committee and hear back from them.
Dean?
Yeah, I agree with the MAPC statement. I think it really put the town manager, if we were telling him to sign it, or if we were supposed to sign it, it put him in a very bad situation. It's reading through that statement. It was a lot of very tangible sorts of efforts that people wanted to take, many of which we've already taken. I'm interested in the fact that many of our larger cities that probably have more problems than we do, the mayors did not sign it. I didn't see Mayor Walsh signing it. I didn't see Joe Curtatone signing it. Lots of other people that could have signed that, which they didn't. I think the whole thing was sort of overkill. I think it's inappropriate. This statement here, frankly, there's no way that I would ever vote to approve this statement that Foxborough has put together. It's virtue signaling of the worst sort. I think it makes some statements without backing or without proof about racism that I'm not sure exist. Certainly not here. I would certainly agree with the idea of the DEIC taking a look at this and in the course of their actions look at the possibility of coming up with a statement which is considerably less incendiary than this and certainly a whole lot less grandstanding than what we see in this one here.
Any other comments, David, Jim? I would support what Joan had said and, direct our efforts on the question of race and diversity and inclusion, to the DEIC, which is now going to have about 15 members, and that's going to represent a very broad, group, and it's a committee. It's not a citizen committee; it's a town committee, and that we were proactive and put together, and I'd like them to do their work and have them report back to us, identifying any problems, if any, and how they should be addressed. But I do share Dean's discomfort with both statements. I think the lengthy statement from the Mass municipality leaders would put a terrible burden on John to basically live up to everything that's in the statement, and many things that really don't necessarily affect us. And quite a bit of the language in the Boxborough statement I just find for my own taste just discomforting. But I certainly leave it up to the DEIC and and I looking, if there are problems, let's identify them and deal with them. David.
So I have just a statement and then a question back. So first of all, for the MAPC statement, I agree that quite a number of the things that are in there we do already do, and so actually I don't consider that a huge burden, frankly. And I don't know why we wouldn't, if we wanted that style, why we would not support that. I mean, I can't see any of the things on that MVPC list that you would not want, right? It's a matter of doing the right thing here, right? As far as the Boxborough list, as far as the Boxborough statement goes, it's like I said, a statement from the heart, I think, and it mentions the names of many people who have been affected by police violence, acknowledge that racism exists. I think that's an important statement to make. I mean, I like both of them. It's a matter of style. But I want to understand what other members of the board are proposing. Would you like the DEIC to come? I think this is what Joan suggested. A DEIC to come up with a statement for the board's consideration.
That was my suggestion.
Yes, that's what. Because the DEIC could come up with one in its own style for the board to consider.
Would that be at the end of their task force work?
Well, I think that's a long way away. I mean, I think we could do this, in a couple of meetings or so, right? Get it on an agenda, get some people to produce a draft. It might take 3 meetings to the way these things work in committees, a draft, some edits, and then an approval kind of thing. I think that's something that the DEIC could do in addition to the. I mean, it's similar to the work that that's in the charge of the committee anyway.
Joan, further comment?
No,
Okay. Well,
I had one last comment, if I could.
sure.
So in terms of helping the DEIC understand what sort of statement we're looking for, I had a question for Dean, which I think you used the phrase virtue signaling, which is, I think it's a phrase that I'm not really used to understanding. I think it's, so maybe you could explain what that means here. And if there were statements here that were that were non-factual, maybe you could pick out one or two of those so we could understand, where the problems might be, and coming up with a statement that you would find agreeable.
Well, I think, this is one of these handy little statements that everybody thinks, oh, well, we'll just sign on to it. And the fact that to this point, Foxborough has not, I guess they're in the process of forming a DEIC.
Yeah, they're talking about
they wanted to check the box and, make it look like they're on the side of the angels, and they signed this thing. I think that's what I think is the epitome of virtue signaling. I think.
So saying something that you think is right is virtue signaling. I'm still. I think I've heard it. I've heard the phrase used, but I didn't really understand what it meant. And is it a problem to say what your goals are or what your intentions are? I'm confused.
I think if these were sincerely held beliefs, I don't think it's virtue signaling. But I think that, it's very handy to sign one of these things. And certainly the way this is written, I would certainly not sign it, because I don't think that and I would oppose the board from signing something like this, because I think there are many inaccurate statements here.
Yeah, Jim, if you go to the paragraph that we acknowledge that there is racism in Boxborough.
Yeah, that seemed pretty easy.
Well, it's not easy for me.
Wow.
And it's not easy for me either. And I think this is the point behind having the DEIC, is to find out if there really is a problem and get some opinions, as opposed to having a bunch of white people coming up with a statement like this and saying that it's a problem. This is an example of you're getting ahead of yourself once again, Jim. And I think let's put down the groundwork, make sure that there really is a problem, find out what the problem is, and that's why we've created the DEIC. And then have them come up with a statement that we can review. Now, some of the other things that I would certainly object to, we don't need to come through with an entire paragraph of people that have died as a result of supposedly police brutality, because we could probably come up with another list even longer of police officers who've died at the hands of criminals. And I don't think we need a shopping list like that. So I think a short, concise statement based on fact, which in my opinion, this might be the facts in Boxborough, but I doubt that it is. And I'm not sure at all that it's the facts in Acton. So I think it's very important to do your homework. Don't just think you're going to sign on to something. We form a committee, we go to all this effort, we've had all of these discussions through many meetings about this. Let the DEIC work, have them come up with something, and then I would consider it.
Yeah, I mean, let the committee, do its work, and if there are problems, identify them. But the whole idea in the charge did not assume that Acton's a racist community, that there's rampant prejudice and intolerance. It's do the work. David.
So I think we can have a statement of our beliefs without, you know, prejudging the conclusions of the DEIC. All right. So, you know, I think we could have a statement about systemic racism that doesn't, you know, that puts forward what we believe to be right and true, rather than, I mean, and without again assuming facts not in evidence. And to that end, I mean, I would move that we ask the DEIC to produce a statement about systemic racism for the board's consideration.
I'm sorry?
I would move that we. I would move that we ask the DEIC to produce a statement about systemic racism for the board's consideration, or our position on systemic racism.
Systemic racism in Acton or societally?
I would let the DEIC do what they want to do.
Well, they're coming up with a statement that they want us to adopt and sign, right?
Yes. For our consideration.
For our consideration. Well, should we, as a board, make the direction that we're talking about systemic racism at Acton, or are we talking about it societally?
I mean, I think we're talking about what our position is on systemic racism. I'm not. I think we can say what we believe is right, without having to say that it can't possibly happen here.
It doesn't have to be geographic specific.
Right. We know what is right, and we can state what is right.
So you're talking about a general statement on systemic racism.
Again, I'm not trying to tell the DEIC what exactly to do. I made my motion, and it doesn't make sense to me to put into that motion the outcome of that motion. We might as well just draft the statement ourselves if we want to do that. If we want to draft a statement, this group of 5 draft a statement, we could do that. But Joan suggested that we ask the DEIC to do that, and that's what we normally do. We usually ask the committees in that who cover the particular areas to do the groundwork for us and give things back to us for our approval.
And revisions as needed.
Well, again, it's for our consideration, right? What we want to do with it is we can vote it up and down, we can amend it, whatever we want.
Mm-hmm. So your motion was to instruct the DEIC to draft a statement for the Board of Selectmen on systemic racism.
Yes.
Is there a second? Okay. Is there discussion? Okay, being no further discussion, let's vote. David, please.
Mr. Snyder-Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I say aye. So that passes unanimously.
Okay. Well, thank you. The next agenda item is number 10, which is the fossil fuel ban decision by Attorney General Maura Healey. Jim again, please.
Thanks. I'm still kind of reeling from the last discussion, which just had me understanding the differences in our sort of views in a sharper way than before. I wonder if I could suggest we take a very short break.
Okay.
So let that sit before we move on to the next topic.
Thank you. All right, let's break for 5 minutes. We'll come back about 10 after 9.
Thanks.
From the Patriots.
What's this?
She's going to go watch football.
we may all be back.
All right, I think we're all back.
Thanks. Thanks
Okay. Okay. The five of us are. John is back.
Yes. Hi.
Okay, so next item is discuss the fossil fuel ban decision by Attorney General Maura Healey.
Thanks. Get my notes up here. Okay, so so you may recall that Brookline passed a bylaw to prevent natural gas and other fossil fuel hookups between the distribution system and new housing, new buildings. They had some exceptions for research facilities. They added an exception for cooking. They added, and then they also added a review and appeal process for special cases, for things like large buildings where there was no financially reasonable way to do hot water heating for without fossil fuels. Then the Attorney General, who has to review all town bylaw changes, overrode the bylaw, said it was not legal, that was preempting various state regulatory authorities. The reason I'm talking about this with the board is that there is now an effort among 13 Massachusetts cities and towns to figure out how to allow towns and cities to make these kinds of bylaws. And they are working with the Rocky Mountain Institute, which is a Colorado-based energy think tank that's been doing amazing work over the last few decades. And they are understanding approaches to, for example, what would a legislative fix look like to allow towns and cities to do this, and what parts of the goal of reducing fossil fuel use could be met by perhaps zoning changes, which are very clearly under the authority of towns and cities, such as providing density bonuses for net zero houses in the way that Newton does, for example. They're also looking at the possibility of if there is a legislative fix, is there a way of getting these towns and other towns to have resolutions that go forward to their state legislators saying, please support these efforts. And we have the earlier versions of this board that I have listened to and been at meetings of, some people have expressed an interest in having a similar kind of bylaw or a method in Acton.
As the Brookline attempt.
Yes, something similar to Brookline, in order to basically stop digging the hole deeper. That we, if we're trying to, since we've just passed this resolution at town meeting to reduce our fossil fuel use quickly over the next 10 years, certainly we want to have new houses and new buildings not be using fossil fuel right from the start, wherever that's possible, because it would be expensive and impractical, at least very expensive, to have houses switch over just a few years in. So the idea is to intervene early on. So the reason I'm back to the board is because I wanted to understand if there still was if there is a majority in the board that wants to explore this direction. And if we do, I'm happy to join in with these other cities and towns and recruit other people, perhaps from the Green Advisory Board, perhaps from citizens groups, to help with this consortium of 13 towns to explore next steps and then bring them back to the board. So I'm looking for feedback on that idea and questions.
Sure, David?
Well, this has come up a few times in the board during my tenure and maybe before. Jim called it digging the hole deeper. It's the same thing for me. It makes absolutely no sense to have a building constructed now or a home constructed now that's going to last for 75 years or 100 years and have it use natural gas when we want to be off of natural gas in 25 years. It just makes no sense. I will say that one other alternative for us, I've been chatting with Senator Eldridge about this and the Brookline situation. I believe that our legislative delegation, given a resolution or request from just us, is willing to file a bill that would allow cities and towns to control, have bylaws to control fossil fuel infrastructure. So that is something that we could do quickly if we want. We could do it tonight, but we may want to consult with some people beforehand. But I think that could happen even without reviewing. It doesn't preclude any other methods that that Jim talked about. It's a pretty simple mechanism to just allow to have at the state level allow communities to regulate fossil fuel infrastructure.
Dean?
Yeah, I think a better way to attack this is not from the supply side, but to attack it from the demand side. And I think it's more important that folks, whether it's the Rocky Mountain Institute, whether it's Green Acton, whether it's whoever they are, to take much more of an educational effort and explain to people what the objections are to the use of fossil fuel, rather than using a sledgehammer approach of the government imposing its will on the people. I think it's more important that people be able to make an educated choice as to what sort of fuel sources they feel is appropriate to use in their houses and not put any artificial barriers in their way. It's certainly choices that I've made in my own home, with putting in mini splits and that sort of thing, and very fuel efficient heating devices and that sort of thing. It's something as a result of an educational effort. And, I would not be in favor of doing anything that is going to impose any more governmental restrictions on the homeowners and business owners.
Joan?
Do we know how much of the housing stock in Acton is serviced with these fossil fuels?
From an approximate point of view, you can think of the town as being about half hooked up to natural gas, and then there's a great deal of the rest is using oil.
Yeah.
The growth of modern electric heat, these air source heat pumps that Dean was referring to, and ground source heat pumps, are a rapidly growing but still small portion of how Acton heats. And there still are a few households that actually use the old style baseboard electric heat that's incredibly expensive and very inefficient. But in some places, that's how the houses were built.
Well, I would certainly be for Jim if your group could work out legislation that was similar to what passed in Brookline that would pass muster, and that wouldn't be subject. I guess in that particular instance, it was a bylaw that had to be approved by the Attorney General, and she's reluctant because I can't approve this for reasons A, B, and C as much as I want to. So whatever the glitches are, work them out, because David's absolutely right. I mean, we've got to take the bull by the horns and say, you know, look, for new construction, not existing construction, we're not requiring everybody who has oil or gas in their house to within 5 years incur the cost of converting over. We're just saying in new housing stock construction, you have to stay away from, you have to use alternative energy sources, and I would support that. So, you know, yeah, I would say go to work on that. David.
Should we ask the Green Advisory Board to make a suggested course of action here? You know, that thing that you just mentioned, John, that's exactly what Senator Eldridge proposed in his bill, that we could vote tonight, or we could ask the Green Advisory Board for their opinion. It just removes that impediment that that forced the Attorney General's hand, right? So the bill that Senator Eldridge is proposing, it would just make it allowable for cities and towns to regulate fossil fuel infrastructure. And it's specifically to what you mentioned for new construction. You know, so we get asked from time to time, should we allow natural gas down such and such street, right? And for all intents and purposes, we have to vote yes, right? And Senator Eldridge's bill means that we don't have to vote yes, and we could require developers to, in any new construction, use ground source heat pumps or whatever the board and the town meeting thought was appropriate. I mean, we would bring bylaw proposals to town meeting, and town meeting would make its judgment as to what was appropriate. But we can't do any of that until the legislature allows us to.
Well, Gene, I'm sorry.
I'd be very reluctant to vote. I have to vote no tonight on something like that until I've actually seen the legislation and understood the whole process a lot more, and certainly read the bill. So I would certainly be opposed to that kind of an action tonight.
Jim.
I'd be happy to work with Gab on this. I'm their liaison, and I could come back after they've had a chance to chew it over, and I can talk with David to make sure I understand the Senator Eldridge's proposal too, so we can get all that information in front of Gab. And the last thought is, I just wanted to agree with Dean on the part about education and persuasion, that especially when we look at all of the existing housing stock, there's folks that are looking at, who currently have oil systems or electric baseboards, are going to would financially benefit from knowing about air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. And so yeah, I think that's another aspect of this that I'm sure the Green Advisory Board has started talking about as well, which is how do you get that kind of education and information in the hands of homeowners, so that they can act on we've just had this overwhelming vote about the climate emergency at town meeting, and people want to know what they can do. So it's very important to be able to offer these options to people, like stepping up to Acton Power Choice Green, or looking at when they're replacing their heating or cooling systems. These things we definitely want to do a lot of education.
Okay, so do we have a consensus then for Jim to take the issue back to the Green Advisory Board and then come back to us with a recommendation? Is that the sense? Okay, so then let's do that.
Great,
thanks. And we'll stand by for when you want this on again.
Yep.
Okay, good. So then item 11 is discuss the archaeology bylaw. Dean.
Thank you. So somewhere, hopefully waiting in the background, should be Bob Ferrara and perhaps Bill Dickinson from the Historical Commission. I'm liaison to that board. They've been discussing quite a bit recently, and I think there was actually an earlier draft attempt some years ago to look at creating an archaeology bylaw in an attempt to protect primarily ceremonial stone landscapes. There seems to be some pretty convincing evidence that many of these are related to Native American ceremonial sites. And these sorts of things have come up in the past. And the discussion about things like some of the sites up in North Acton, the trail through time, that sort of thing, which are on public land so that we can protect them. But then there's also a possibility of uncovering some of these sites during the development process on privately owned land. So with that, I think if we can have Bob and Bill take over, they've got a presentation for us.
Yeah,
So
that'd be great.
So
Bill, this is Bill. So what I think we'll do is I'll start out, and Bob's gonna screen share, and then I'll go through the first slide, and then we'll continue, and then Bob will carry on with the presentation.
So, Bob, you should have permission to screen share.
Please.
He has that permission.
All right, I'm working on it. Okay. Is that it? Is that viewable?
No, not yet.
Oh, I do.
You should have a screen share button in the bottom of your screen.
Oh, yeah, I've done it a bunch of times. I'm a little.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Yep.
And then we'll get it in presentation mode. Is that it?
Perfect.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm Bill Dickinson. I'm the chair of the Acton Historical Commission, and Bob Farrar is with me, and he's been heading up the this effort to create an archaeological bylaw. And we want to have this bylaw, as Dean had mentioned, to better preserve the archaeological and historical assets of the town of Acton. And Acton, through Mass General Law 40, Section 8D, created our Historical Commission for the preservation, protection, and development of historical and archaeological assets. Well, right now, we are really just trying to protect the project structure, building structures, not the archaeological aspects or assets. So what are the assets we're trying to protect? Well, above the ground, there are Native American ceremonial stone walls and structures and colonial artifacts. And underground, there are cultural artifacts like pottery and fire pits, tools, and evidence of previous cultures, both Native American and colonial. So what we're looking for the board, we're looking for support that the concept of an archaeological bylaw. And we're looking for the board to allow us to work with town council to develop this bylaw for presentation at town meeting. So with that, I'm going to let Bob take over and give you a little background and a better description of the bylaw.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. And thanks to Dean for that introduction. As they've noted, demolition bylaw helps a lot with structures, but we can't do much with what's underground. However, back in 2009, there was an attempt to draft a bylaw. In fact, it was a very good bylaw, but it just seemed to lose momentum with the financial crisis of the time, and it just slipped much further back. And actually, the impetus for that bylaw that came, well, Doug Haley, as many of you know, of course, was one of the key people with that. Also, the Historical Commission worked quite hard on it. And where it really started was back with Pine Hawk, the Pine Hawk discovery in South Acton. If some of you may remember that, back in 1999, when you went to build a sewer plant, Acton went to build a sewer plant, we were required because it involved federal funding to also do an archaeological survey. Most things don't, but federal requirements do. And that led to just a really big find. 3,000 artifacts dating back some 7,000 years right here in our backyard in south of Acton. And that actually started a group called the Friends of Pinehawk, which I was privileged to join because I happened to be president of the library at the time, saying, hey, we got to understand this a little better. So we went on to work with actually the schools, the library, and other Discovery Museum and other interest groups to put together a program. Actually, every fall we now have several events and lectures, and we've understood our local archaeology much better. We've also made contacts with a lot of Native American groups. And one of the interesting things that's happening kind of now, just in this moment in time, many of the Native Americans are saying, hey, wait a minute, we know we have this past, but our culture was broken, but we've been separated from our past. But we know something's there, we think these are valuable, and now it's time to start working with towns, us folks, to protect them, because they know they can't do it themselves, they just don't have the numbers. But so it's an interesting time to be forming these relationships. We wanted to show you, give you some idea of what we're talking about, what we're trying to protect. We're going to show you quickly two maps. One is a pre-contact map, in other words, before Concord was settled, the first inland town in Massachusetts. So that's 7,000 or more a year before that. Where did these people live? Where do we think they live? This was the survey done by PAL, Professional Archaeology Laboratories, back in 2009. And the red areas are the ones where you very high probability that you're going to find something. Yellow is not so much, and the others are all fully developed, and you're probably, whatever's there is gone. But one thing I would point out, though, you're looking for water features. Native Americans, particularly during these periods, settled around water. Nagog Pond, that area up in the upper left, if you can see there, that's and that's exactly where Concord is building their water filtration plant. If you look in the very bottom, it actually is not showing too well, but that's the Pinehawk site itself, where we found all those artifacts. But in the other red areas, you're going to see are along like Fort Pond Brook or Neshoba Brook. So that's where you're going to find this sort of thing. Let me go on. So that's pre-contact. So that's before, all the colonial wars and all that good stuff. Now you come back to the post-contact period. And if you remember, up in that northwest corner of Acton, near Fort Pond and Pond, you had the praying village, one of the 16 praying villages that were established in Massachusetts back in the 1600s. So that's why you see a lot of heavy purple up there and the light purple in this area. And then again here, this is along the Neshoba Brook. Trail through Chime is up here. So those are the areas that we would focus on. Okay, just to go. All right. We already mentioned there's an existing bylaw, and one of the things that the commission asked me to do was look at other towns. And I will tell you, what was already written here, although it was never adopted by town meeting, was awfully good. I thought it was a very fine product compared to the few others that do exist. But the other thing the commission told me when we started working on this was, what happened there? Did that screen just go there? Okay. They said, look, we want people to understand it on how it actually is rolled out, not just a bunch of legal words on paper. And so they said, go do a flow chart, which we did. We've actually gone through 7 iterations now. We think it's getting pretty close to a final flow chart, although it's not legal language. And these are some of the people we had look at it. Land use, Selby staff has been on it. We've shown it to Stamsky and McNary, several local archaeologists, including the former head of the Massachusetts Archaeological Association, Tonya Largy, who lives down in Wayland, has been very helpful. And so basically what the flowchart calls upon or requires, there's explicit triggers. In other words, several conditions have to be met before they'd even be considered to have this site looked at. And if they're met, if those conditions are met, they would be pushed over to the AHC to begin a formal evaluation. What we tried to do, and what what Selby has insisted on, but I think very correctly, is it has to be integrated with how the town already does business. We think when you look at the details, and certainly the town council will help us get there, and the town manager's office will help us get there. And we're not trying to have way off of one side. It's a little special procedure. No, we want this to be simple, easy, understandable to developers, so they can see what they're getting into, and very explicit what's happening, and also explicit time limits at each step. And in those rare cases, and I don't think will happen very often, but when they do, we will require a mitigation plan. Or so you'll either have to try to save the stuff or document it or whatever. I mean, there'll be some, or you could even, in the very biggest case, stop things for a while, which is what happened in the Pine Home town in South Acton. I don't know if you can read the purpose, but that's kind of the preamble to our work. Okay. So I would go, this is a final slide here. By the way, those two, I should have mentioned it then, those two maps I showed you are already on the town's GIS database. They're now available to the public. Anybody can see them. And it's good information for all of us to know. What we'd like to do next is review with these groups. Obviously, we wanted to stop here first and get the Selectmen blessing. Go ahead. Conservation Commission actually is meeting this Wednesday, and we're going to be meeting with them. And then go on to these other groups, including some general community outreach. We'd like to have a couple of meetings to explain what we're trying to do. We do want to meet with some developers. We're not trying to throw arbitrary roadblocks. We want them to understand perfectly what we're trying to protect. And one other interesting thing we want to try, and we're going to be applying in a few weeks, or the process when it starts, is for some just very modest amount of funding. So if we need to have an expert look at something very quickly, a local archaeology firm or expert, we'd have it available. For the most part, it will be funded by developers. The big projects, of course, that would be on their side. And then well, this is our punchline. This is our ask. It's the very last bullet. And Bill, you want to pipe in here?
Well, I'll just reiterate that we're looking for the board's support in proceeding with this bylaw, and that we're really ready to hopefully work with town council to start putting some legal language together so we can submit it at the town meeting. So we thank you for your time, and Bob and I can answer any questions that you may have.
So questions, comments from board members? I only have a part. I can't see Dave.
Oh, let me stop the share.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we're all back.
Yeah.
So do we have? So the request is, can we get behind this, and have Bill and Bob begin the process of shepherding the bylaw, the proposed bylaw, through the various town committees, and begin work with Nita Pickering Cook in the actual drafting. Jim.
I'm an enthusiastic supporter of this work. I would have some questions at the end after we've heard from other board members, if we have time.
David.
Yeah, just a couple questions on the last slide. Where you had the list of town groups to review, that's reviewing the language of the proposed bylaw after it's put together?
Well, actually, the planning board, I would like to see the planning board earlier in the game because they're so important. But some of the others, we would push off till we have better language.
Part of it is we're verifying the work, our flow chart about all the triggers and the responses, and so a lot of those groups are just ones we want to do kind of round out our flow chart with all the boards, and then then get to the legal language and probably do another round.
Okay, and then you that last slide also said you were going to apply for a CPC fiscal 21 money.
Yeah.
What is that for again? I wasn't clear from the slide.
Okay, we have what's called a preliminary review. There's a multi-step process, really only two bits. There's a preliminary review and a deep review. Preliminary review, you want to get a quick feeling of whether this site could potentially have anything. And if it's a developer, you certainly could ask them to fund that. If this is to bring in a professional to look at it very quickly. There may be cases where if it's a homeowner or a large plot or maybe a public interest group, I don't know, we'd like to be able to have a fund available so we could hire somebody quickly to look at this.
Well, I see. So you're looking to have some seed money for when the bylaw might be passed.
Yes.
After the bylaw, yeah, yes.
So I'm assuming you can't do that until after the bylaw is passed.
That's true.
Right. So that's not
true.
that's not fiscal 21 because we wouldn't be passing this until annual town meeting at the earliest, right? So
and town meeting seems to be moving back too. So we
but it's still fiscal 21. But yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to understand what the time frames are.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. No problem. My understanding. Thank you.
Yeah. Dean.
Yeah, I think to David's point about the ask at CPC, and actually we're in fiscal 21 right now, so
I'm sorry. Yes,
they actually would have been asking for money for fiscal 22. I think there probably is some latitude for them to make an application where this is being supported and proposed by an existing town committee, the Acton Historical Commission. And CPC has approved modest grants along the same lines of sort of planning and preparation for these things for both in the past Acton Historical Commission and for the Historic District Commission. So I think that technically it could probably be done. Of course, it's hard to imagine what CPC might agree to, but I think their application probably could go forward, and then it'll get thrown in the mill with everything else. The other point I think to as far as it would be nice to have some money available, presuming that this got passed at town meeting, whenever town meeting occurs, it'd be nice to have some money to work with right off the bat. Especially, for homeowner situations or, big developers, they can pay for it themselves. But if we had something, for instance, a farmer that was attempting to enlarge his fields or something like that, a lot of the farmland that exists out there is actually adjacent to water resources. So those might be areas that you might look at for finding ceremonial stone landscapes. Probably a lot of them are gone.
Yeah.
But I think, some individuals that, might want to do some work with that, which would trigger it depending upon clearing a field or opening up a field or redeveloping something for an agricultural purpose. So I would suggest along those lines, just thinking out loud, that perhaps the Acton now has an agricultural commission. So that might be another group that you could check the box on as well.
Thank you.
Further comments?
No, I would support this.
Okay. So I don't think we have to take a vote. Is there a consensus that we, support and wish the AHC to go forward with their with the proposed bylaw? Okay.
Last question.
Please.
Thanks. So I remember, Bob, going to a meeting with you that included Doug Harris, the preservation. See, he's the Deputy Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Narragansett,
right.
And he was talking about it seems like a lot of our ceremonial stone landscapes are on conservation lands, the ones that are still intact.
Many of them, yes.
And there was talk of a memorandum of understanding between the tribes and towns to sort of jointly steward these existing features. And I was wondering if where that conversation was at. It seemed like a very exciting opportunity to be.
Yeah, it's a little bit paused. I don't know if you know, Doug had a stroke. He's okay. He's okay now. But we're kind of wait. When he's back on his feet, we'll try it again. But yeah, it was a memorandum of understanding. But honestly, he was the one, since you mentioned him, he's the one that really got me interested in the historical commission. He said the place to go is to go to the historical commission. So I applied to be a member of this historical commission. I'm now the newest member.
We're glad to have him. He does all the work.
Great. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. There's a chance of getting back to that conversation. Thank you.
Okay, so proceed then with our support.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob and Bill and team. So our next item is 12, next steps for Crosstown Connect transportation programs. And that was John.
Thank you. So the Crosstown Connect is a regional collaboration with Concord, Littleton, Maynard, Sudbury, and Westford. This is a partnership that has been very successful over the last 5 or 6 years or so. We've won awards, international awards for this programming that we've put together. We're at the point now where the IMA, the intermunicipal agreement that we have with the other member towns, is expiring on the 16th of this month, and it's necessary to renew it. We're also at a point where I think we need to relook at a couple of the ways that this system and the partnership is operating, and I think we're embarking on a process right now with the other member towns to make those changes. But I'd ask the board tonight to authorize me to execute a short-term extension of this intermunicipal agreement, just to allow that work to take place. A time frame that I would request is through the end of the fiscal year, which would be through June 30th. And so just to give you a couple updates, this Crosstown Connect Collaborative is the municipal partners I mentioned, but it also includes corporate partners. Some of the bigger businesses in the region participate and are members, and the work involves trying to help their commuters and their employees access last mile transportation solutions. It also is the jump start for the shuttle programs and a lot of the other initiatives that we do. In Acton and Littleton and Maynard, we use the same dispatch service, which is run through Crosstown Connect to dispatch our senior vans and some of our other on-demand van services. So we get a lot of value and benefit from the partnership, but there's some things that have changed. We've lost some grant funding, and there's some transition happening with some of the people that we work with. And so this is just an update and asking the board for your support in extending it. Franny Osmond, who's been very involved since day one in all this, she's been a great champion for transportation, in particular with this partnership. I've been working closely with her to make sure that we're on the same page with some of the things that we're working on. I believe Joan is the designee from the board to work on this, and I'm the alternate. So that's all. I just wanted to bring that tonight with any questions.
You'd like a request a short-term extension through the end of the fiscal year.
Please.
Move to approve the extension to the end of the year.
Is there a second?
Now, I'll second, but it's a friendly amendment to authorize the town manager to engage in an agreement to extend to the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. So that's your and Joan, you accept the amendment, and we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, then David, if we may proceed with the vote.
Mr. Snyder Grant? Aye. Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye, so that's unanimous.
Thank you for your help. I'll report back progress.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is we called it housekeeping for email policy and communications with staff. We never came up with a formal policy on this. We kind of muddle along in kind of a comfort zone. So let me just, and it's typically, Jim, the chair each year or the person the chair designates to respond to emails that are directed through the board's shell. So doing it this year, when I get a request, I acknowledge the receipt, generally say that the issue will be taken up at a board meeting on such and such a date, and please join us. And I certainly avoid any personal opinions. And I think it's really important that all of these emails be responded to promptly. And in all instances, I copy board members so they could see that a reply has been made. And then the issue that Nina Pickering Cook had raised in my first year on the board, is the act of copying all board members a communication with a quorum of the board outside of a meeting, and I just didn't really buy that. I think the problem is, and I think we've all avoided it, is that another board member engages the emailer tagging on to that, and I think we've all avoided that, and I think that's really what we've got to continue to do. There are operational questions that come in about, I have this problem on School Street, or there's a pothole on Main Street, by the Arboretum, and I just routinely refer that to John and copy the board, and the board has followed a practice of not, and no further responses. And then there are other emails that seem to be that they're questions that would be directed to a board member who is either working on that issue or is a member of a liaison to the town committee, and I just refer it to you to the board member. And I think we had that, Jim, with the Cultural Council recently, and you did a very nice job. So I just would would like to continue this practice if everyone's comfortable with it, and if subsequent chairs and vice chairs want to alter it based on circumstances, that's certainly fine with me. Does that make sense to all of you? Okay. Then just a final thing, if they're emails to an individual board member, either on your personal account or your town email, you could respond as you deem appropriate, including a substantive response, but just don't respond to just don't involve a quorum of the board in your response. So I think that that should pretty much cover the emails. John, do you have any concerns? Are we good?
Just the quorum of the board copied on an email raises concerns for me, but you addressed it, so.
Okay, good. Then the other thing, it's a little more complicated, and again, we've kind of muddled along with this for during John's tenure and my tenure, because they parallel. These are communications with town staff by board members, and it's basically, you know, achieving a balance between John's needs as the manager and not encroaching on them, and our job as selectmen and women to get, you know, information that we need. And I'll just say up front, there's no one, you know, right way, you know, to do it. I think we all make a practice, if we're communicating with town staff members, to copy John in on, you know, the email, so he knows exactly what the communication is. Recently, there's been requests to the IT department from select board members asking for that, you know, request for things to be done. And I guess we carry a little more clout than we might think we have, because the you know, staff says, well, you know, selectmen asked me for something, so I better put that at the top of my list. That caused some concerns recently where IT people were, you know, were busy with existing tasks and felt, you know, an obligation to, like, you know, John, what do I do here? And you know, John said he would prefer that, you know, all requests for information, you know, go through him, so because he gives staff work to do, and he felt he would be in a better position, you know, to manage it. So I have given this a fair bit of thought, certainly over the last year, and I've had several conversations with Janet Adachi, who was, you know, a 9-year member of the board, and maybe here's a way that we could think about it. We could all get comfortable. We could look at what we might call mandatory access, including actual telephone or in-person meetings with town staff for issues that, I know this comes up with me all the time, you know, issues come up and, you know, I'm looking for background and, you know, and details, and I'll reach out to town staffers, always, you know, copying John with the questions. I had a recent one with Steve Barrett, and I said, just take your time on it. I don't need a quick reply, but it went to the issue that one of the FinCom members raised about, we see shortfalls in revenue several years into a recession. So I just asked, you know, John, was that the practice during the Great Recession, and what revenue sources were impacted? He got back to me in a couple of days, and it was a good reply, and it was fine. There are also issues where when we get site plans, a select board member is assigned a site plan knowing nothing about it, but you've got to take responsibility and lead the discussion. So you would reach out to someone in planning, I've got this, could I come in and can we talk about it? And also, you know, the common one that, you know, that I've had is either in the, you know, the presentation of a town meeting article, or in putting an outreach together for a town meeting article where we need information, and I'll, you know, deal directly with the town staff person, meet with the town staff person. So I think those are what I thought were mandatory things where the selectmen can go in as long as John is aware, versus, you know, discretionary items such as, hey, I've got this, you know, great new idea how we could do things better, or I'd like to institute I'd like the staff to take on a particular project. Those items are discretionary and should go directly to John as to how he would best think, you know, that should be done on whatever basis works best. So having said that, I'd like to open it up to member comment and discussion. Dean.
Yeah, I think we all have to be aware that it's pretty easy to get on a slippery slope here. Asking an innocent question you think will take somebody 30 seconds for an answer, and then the next, that leads to another, to another, to another. So all of this comes out at the end. I think it's very important that, we all be cognizant of the fact that we hire the town manager to be the manager, and that includes controlling all of the staff and all of their tasks and how they spend their time. And I think we need to be respectful of that. We're paying this guy a lot of money to do the job, and we shouldn't be in the business of undercutting him. This is not a new thing for me. I got hired by Chris Farrell as town manager. And, one of the initial conversations he said to me as a new department head is, never talk to any of the selectmen, and especially never talk to Joan Gardner. So I think it's, and I think I had the same conversation at one time or another with Nancy Banks and Bernie Murphy and Don Johnson and Steve Ledoux. And so I think it's, it's the long history. It's taken a long time, many, many years, over 50 years, to sort of have the office of the town manager institutionalized into the thinking of the town staff, and also into the thinking of the Board of Selectmen. So, as far as some of these momentary contacts that Chairman Benson is talking about, that's one thing. But I think the bottom line for me is that we really need to respect and go through the town manager for anything of any substance whatsoever.
Well, in terms of what I had tried to break it down between where selectmen kind of mandatory access versus discretionary access, if it were the things that I mentioned, if you needed understanding of an issue, if you needed help in preparing a town meeting presentation, if you needed information in conjunction with an outreach for an article, a site plan, you have any problem with selectmen reaching out to town staff, copying John, and getting the answers either by email, by telephone, or in-person meetings, or some combination? Dean, Jim, anyone?
No, I think you've laid out a bunch of helpful distinctions that I'm very comfortable with. I had some questions about cases you hadn't quite covered yet, because I think that for me, the transition from being a sort of outside advocate, where I would just wander into town hall and talk to people all the time, to being a selectman hasn't always gone smoothly. So I'm sure I'm one of the people that has tested the edges or gone beyond them. So I want to make sure I'm doing it right in a way that's doesn't undercut John. So a few cases I'm wondering about. One is that if I'm a liaison to a committee and there's a staff assigned to that committee, like Austin with the Commission on Disabilities, I've often talked directly with Austin without involving John, figuring that Austin, that's sort of part of his job to work with us, and that he would contact John if there was anything raised that was going to involve extra time or extra money. So it's mostly all these logistical things. So I sort of, at one point I wanted to hear from John if that was okay. The other thing is, in terms of contacting IT, I'm pretty sure that I have taken the edges of what the IT help desk is for and stretched it into suggestions about, oh, why don't we do this with the website? So I'll stop that. I'm guessing that that's the wrong place for feature suggestions. Or if I send an email to the IT help desk with things like that, I should start including John in the emails, which I'm very comfortable with. So I guess those two, I had questions about those 2 parts.
John? I'm John. Did you want John to answer?
That would be great if he was.
Yeah.
Well, I think I would respectfully request that if you need something from staff, you work through me,
Okay.
regardless of what it is.
You mean any request of staff should go through you?
Well, generally, yes. I mean, I'm available most hours of the day, waking hours of the day, and if I'm not available, I can make someone else available in my place.
Okay.
So you want, so in my terms of if I want information for a town meeting presentation dealing with the finance department, I should go through you?
Well, generally, it's my job to make sure that you're prepared for town meeting presentations. So I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to bring in anyone that needs to be involved to make sure that you're prepared.
I mean, is that a real good use of your time? I mean, I want you out of here. I want you home with your family at night. I don't want you tied down, an extra line of communication.
I'm happy to do it. It's what I signed up for.
Other comments, David?
No, I don't think I've been making significant requests, around. I mean, I guess I do what you were saying, John. That there was times earlier in the year or late last year where I would ask Kristen a question, for example, and then I would copy John. But I don't know, John Majorati, if that's what you meant, that you should be involved, or we just send the request to you, you send it to Kristen responds to you, and you respond to me.
No, I don't think it has to be that much of a. No, I don't mean to be a gatekeeper for access. That's not the role here. It's just to make sure that if there's an ask, that I'm involved in the ask, and if it's, I can help determine how substantial it is, inside town hall, because sometimes things, as somebody mentioned, sometimes things take longer than you'd seem they should, and sometimes, as you mentioned, John, when a selectman sends something, it rises to the top of the priority list, regardless of what other things are going on. Same thing I do. I mean, we all work for who we work for, and everyone that works for me indirectly works for you. And if they hear from you, they address it.
Well, excuse me. I always try to include John for no other reason that I don't know everything that's going on, so I might be asking one person for something, and John would know that someone else is already working on that, right? And I don't want to start duplicate work or anything, right? So for anything, I make sure John's involved.
Well, what's a comfort level that we all have? I mean, I try to set something out mandatory, discretionary.
But are we far apart here, right, John? I think you said on the request you would always copy John Majorati. Is that right? I think you said, right, if you were asking something from the finance department, that you would copy John Majorati on that. Is that right?
You comfortable with that, John?
Generally, sure.
He wants to be involved more rather than less. So tie goes to the manager.
Jim.
So John, I'm wondering if you feel comfortable with if one of us does a CC when you would have preferred that it be an ask through you. I just want to make sure that you feel comfortable just giving me or the others of us feedback about that, and it's not a foul. It's just, oh, by the way, this is a case where I would have preferred that you go through me instead of just CC me. Because if you can give me feedback, then I feel very comfortable with this process. I just don't want to have to guess all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay.
And I'm happy to do that.
So, I mean, echoing what John Benson said at the beginning, what I do, if I'm, there were times last year where I just wanted a piece of information that I knew that Kristen had, and I just was asking for it, I would still copy the town manager. So but if there's something I want staff to do, I just send it to the town manager and not copy. So I make that differentiation between information and do. Right? I would never ever ask the staff to do anything directly. I want you to start a project to do that. I would never do that. But I would occasionally ask them for information, and I would always copy the manager just in case.
So is under the David's notion, information versus do, like a project, or does that kind of make sense?
If you're asking me, what would be the distinction? Right, but what would...
Where we don't have to go around a horn to get answer to a question. That we can, that a staffer, could respond to in one sentence, one paragraph.
Yeah, I think that's...
I mean, and you're copied.
Right, I'm here to work on all of the things that you want to happen in the town. You set the policy and direction, and I go for it. And if there's things you need to implement that policy, I can get it for you. And if you think that sending a message to a staff person is the quickest way to get it, that's fine. Copy me on it. But I may say, hey, here's the answer, and save my staff person the time as well. It's hard to come up with every single scenario and how it should be applied. But generally, like I said earlier, I would just respectfully request that if you need something from the staff, that you work through me, whether it's formally working through me or informally working through me. That's all.
Dean?
Yeah, I think this has gone on way too long, but I think you have to appreciate the human dynamic of this is that that I find it hard to believe, but people look at us as being Olympian gods on a cloud someplace, and all of a sudden we reach down through 3 layers of bureaucracy and ask somebody a question. You're absolutely terrifying some of these people. And I think it's important that we not do that. And then you get all the speculation goes around. Well, how come the selectmen's reaching out to me personally, and why are they going around my department head? Why are they going around the town manager? I just certainly we can't come up with a scenario for every possible option, but I think I really want to stress to everybody from the point of view of not only supporting the town manager, but supporting the town staff, is that, let it go through. We've got a nicely established pyramid organizational structure, and I think that we should respect it as far as we possibly can. And I know, there's going to be changes, and there's going to be times when people sway from this one way or another. I mean, I run into that because I've known a lot of these people personally for many years, and it's easy to ask an offhand question, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, that's not my role anymore. But I just really beg you folks to keep as much as you possibly can through the town manager. I send stuff to them sometimes on a Sunday night, and I say, don't respond to me. This is a Monday morning or Monday afternoon thing. Don't drop everything to do this, but can you give me this piece of information? And he always gets back to me, and I think we just have to respect that we don't want it to appear either to the town manager or to the town staff that we're undercutting him, or that we're going around him.
I will strive to do better.
Others? Okay, I think we have a comfort level that we'll do as much as possible through John.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have one more regular item that may take a little bit of time. Do you mind if we just go through the consent items first, so we're done with that? So, consent item 15, approved meeting minutes September 14, 2020. 16, committee appointments, Jim Luciani, full member, Cable Advisory Committee, term to expire June 30, 2023. 17, committee appointments, Richard Kelleher, full member, Design Review Board, term to expire June 30, 2023. Number 18, accept gift, Recreation Department for $50 from Sandy Eldridge to be used for constructing a dog park in Acton. 19, accept gift, Recreation Department for $50 from Mark J. Fredericks to be used for constructing a dog park in Acton. 20, accept gift, Natural Resources for $6,324 from Presby Environmental for a septic system for the Narrow Sports Pavilion. 21, accept gift, Recreation Department for $1,500 for Think for Fun to support production costs for the 2021 Summer Concert Series. 22, accept gift, Recreation Department for $100 for David and Maureen Christmas to be used for constructing a dog park in Acton. 23, accept gift, Recreation Department for $500 from Steinberg Lally Charitable Foundation for purchasing pickleball equipment for the Elm Street courts. 24, accept gift, Recreation Department for $48.25 from various donors for Jones Field and playground renovation. 25, accept gift, Natural Resources for $230.16 from Adam D. Arthur to be deposited in the Natural Resources account for future rail trail improvement. 26, board to declare surplus materials, Department of Public Works. 27, accept gift, Board of Selectmen $4,000 from the Acton Conservation Trust towards the acquisition costs for Piper Lane property as a community preservation open space project. So do I have a motion to approve consent items 15 through 27 inclusive?
So move.
Second.
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 Okay. David, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye.
Okay, the final new special business item is to discuss the Acton Boxborough Regional High School mascot. This is not before us. This is a matter within the before the school committee at present. There was a petition brought by current, and it's now included former Acton Boxborough parents and others, seeking to change the name of the Acton Boxborough School of Bassett from the AB Colonials. That's also engendered a counter petition on Facebook. They both sides have probably over 2,000 signatures. The school committee is taking it up on October 15th. I don't know whether they're planning a vote or further discussion, and I wanted to put it before our board whether it was appropriate that we take a position on the mascot issue. So I'll ask, we have one, since it originated in the schools and with some alumni, we have one board member who's a member of the AB class of 68, and that's Dean, and I'd like you to open the conversation.
Okay, thank you. So
great class of 68.
I think, normally I would say that this is not something that the Board of Selectmen would get involved with because, it should be the there's certain sensitivity that maybe there should be a regional school issue and let them deal with it. However, it's really hard to divorce the two. Certainly, Blacksboro is an important component of the AB schools, but let's face it, the majority of the people and the majority of the money to those schools come from the town of Acton. As John pointed out, I'm a graduate in '68. Both my sons attended there as well and graduated. So we've got a long and rich history with the schools. I think my feeling is that there seems to be a misconception that the term Acton Boxborough colonial somehow talks about colonialism that we've heard about in other places and indeed in parts of North America. Certainly the impetus and the understanding that everyone had of the term colonials going back to the early 1960s at least was that it was in reference to the revolutionaries, the Minutemen who fought and died in Concord and other places during the Revolution. It really did not take into account any impacts that colonialism might have been having on Native American populations in Massachusetts and throughout the rest of North America. Really, it was geared towards Isaac Davis. And I find it very upsetting that people don't realize that and that people are willing to discard that. Just because we recognize, because we're in the cradle of history here, in the cradle of democracy here, I'm surprised that people don't appreciate it more, the value that these revolutionaries had. They came, they fought, and they died to provide us with the liberty to even have these kind of discussions. Otherwise, we'd be getting all of our orders still from London. And I think it's very important that we recognize that and we respect that. Now, certainly as far as the impact on the Native American population, frankly, a lot of the Native American population, many of them unfortunately died out due to the introduction of European diseases before the true colonial period even got started. The early pilgrims landing on Cape Cod, they found an area with bodies everywhere because of diseases that had struck here from explorers and fishermen and traders that were, predated through colonial people that we think of around here. So that being said, I think there's been a lot of effort recently to try to understand and celebrate the Native American heritage here in Acton. We just had this discussion about an archaeology bylaw to understand and respect ceremonial stone landscapes. We have the Trail Through Time up in North Acton that investigates a lot of those sites. We've got all the stuff with Pine Hawk that's gone on. So I think even some simple things like the naming of some of our streets. How many kids in high school realize that the term Newtown Road actually referred to the fact that it was a road that went from the center of Acton to the new town, which was the praying Indian settlement by Fort Pond of the Chover Indians. So I think, just because we want to celebrate our traditional history does not mean that we want to denigrate anybody else's history. So I think it's appropriate for the Board of Selectmen to make a motion to support the fact that we support Isaac Davis, we support the rest of the colonial and revolutionaries. Frankly, it'd be a lot easier if it wasn't for the fact that Concord had already taken the name of their mascot as the Minutemen. Because let's face it, we had Minutemen too. But the last thing that I would say to you, if you look over my shoulder, you see the old sign there, Charter Tree Service, and even the exchange word for our telephone exchange traditionally in Acton was colonial, 34086. So I just think that it's important that we make a statement. I will certainly be making a statement on my own. And many other people have been making statements one way or another, but certainly I fully support the continuation of the mascot as the Colonials.
I second Dean's comments. I've been here a long time, and I recently reread the history of Acton, and I think the Colonials is perfectly good name.
David.
Well, yeah, I really like Revolutionary War history. I've read a lot of Revolutionary War history, and we could have a mascot based on that if we want. But I have to say, colonialism is a really troubling concept where a power comes in to dominate a people. It's taking us hundreds of years to get away from colonialism. And if we have to explain why the word colonialism doesn't apply to colonial, that's a little awkward. But the biggest reason for me, actually, is that the students should decide. Everybody is, the current students, everybody is, weighing in one way or the other. I think this current students should decide. I would not support a motion by this board to tell the students what mascot they should have.
Jim?
Yeah, I also want as the school committee makes the decision and they look at, these thousands of comments, pro and con, I do want them to weigh the current students the most. They're the ones who are being asked to, go out there and play sports and be excited about, this old white guy mascot. And if they find that divisive, if they find it like not a point of unity for the school, then it's not a useful mascot. So I also don't think it's in our bailiwick to do, to come up with a blank statement. But my thought is, if I was writing a personal statement, I would be in favor of changing
So
it.
I had thought about this and wrote up a little background and a possible solution to all of this. So I started, for a small town, Acton has a unique place in American history in challenging British oppression and later slavery. On the morning of April 19, 1775, it was the citizen soldiers of Acton, led by 30-year-old Isaac Davis, who took on the strongest fighting force in the world. Isaac Davis, Private Abner Hosmer, and Acton's drummer boy were killed that morning on Concord Bridge. Isaac Davis left a wife and 4 children. Mr. Davis, Mr. Hosmer, and the young boy are buried beneath the monument on our town common. And in 1862, it was another generation of Acton citizen soldiers, the Davis Blues, who were the first unit in the nation to answer President Lincoln's call to end slavery and preserve the Union. As the AB School Committee decides next week whether to retire the colonial mascot, it may be beneficial to pause and have a teach-in on local history where the differing aspects and the positive and the negative can be presented. At the high school, the Social Studies Department, members past and present, can make a very knowledgeable and balanced presentation. One possible solution is to update the colonial mascot by commemorating the colonial wife who ran the farm and tended the family while the men were away fighting, and adding the faces of today's Acton students, Chinese, Indian, Black and Brown, Latino, and LBGT. Let's not sever connections, let's add to them. So that's my comment. Dean, is there anything further before? I think Dean wants to bring a motion.
No, I think your suggestion about encouraging the schools to further discuss this, I think is a really good one, and certainly, in my opinion, there's a disconnect between the high school students who are signing on to this and their understanding of history. I could be wrong with that, but I think there's a lot of history that needs to be pointed out to folks. So, with that being said, I would like to move that the Board of Selectmen express their opinion to the school committee in support of the continuation of the Mascot, the Acton Boxborough Colonials.
Okay, is there a second?
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, then, David, would you please call our roll?
Mr. Snyder Grant,
No.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I vote nay, so it passes 3-2.
Okay, how do we wish to communicate this to the school committee? Do we have would you wish to communicate it, Dean? Because it sounds like you're going to take a.
Well, certainly I will do my own communication, but I think probably to de-escalate things here.
Okay.
If we ask the town manager to
Okay.
convey that to his opposite number, Peter Light.
That makes much better sense. Okay. Jim?
Yeah, I think that's the right way to proceed. I think communicating that it was a split vote would be helpful.
Okay. Okay, so I don't have any further business. Being none, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Joan?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. David?
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye. So we're adjourned.
Okay. Thank you all. See you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Good night.